Hey guys, tonight we are going on a journey. But not to a grand castle or a glorious battlefield. We're going to the muddy, forgotten alleyways of the Middle Ages, to walk in the footsteps of someone whose story is almost never told. We'll be exploring a life lived on the absolute fringes of society and asking a heavy question in a world full of daggers, disease, and daily violence. Could the most dangerous thing for this person have been motherhood? It's a side of history that's raw and uncomfortable, and a stark reminder that survival itself was the greatest luxury. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where you're all tuning in from. So please drop your city and the time in the comments below. It makes this feel a little more like we're all gathered around a small warm fire together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world for now is very small. It's defined by the scratchy wool of your tunic against your skin in the damp, earthy smell of the floor where you sleep. You wake up not to a gentle sunrise but to the insistent crowing of a rooster just outside the wattle and daub wall of your family's single-room hut. The first sensation of the day is the cold seeping up from the ground, a dampness that never truly leaves your bones. Your life is governed by rhythms, ancient and unyielding. The sun dictates your waking and sleeping hours, and the distant clang of the church bell tells you when to pray, a sound that slices through the otherwise quiet landscape of birdsong and the lowing of a neighbor's cow. You are perhaps 14, maybe 15 years old. It's hard to be sure. Birthdays aren't celebrated with cakes and songs, they are simply a mother turn of the season, another year of labor etched into your young hands. Your days are a repeating loop of chores. You fetch water from the communal well, a heavy wooden yoke pressing into your shoulders. You help your mother grind grain with a heavy stone quern until your arms ache. You spend hours in the small plot of land behind, your fingers deep in the dark soil pulling weeds from around the precious cabbages and onions. Life here is lived on the edge. The system, though you don't know its name, is feudalism. Your family doesn't own this land. You work it for a lord you've maybe seen once in your life, a remote, godlike figure who rides a great horse and wears clothes without a single patch. In return for his permission to exist on this patch of earth, your father gives him a hefty portion of the harvest. Then another portion goes to the church, the tithe. What's left is what you live on. This year, the rains came at the wrong time. The wheat was meager, and a blight turned half the oat field a sickly brown. Your father, his face already a road map of worry, grew quieter. The harvest was a disaster. There's a constant, low-level hunger that gnaws at your belly. Dinner, like most nights, is pottage. This is a strange little historical detail that defined the taste of an era. The pottage is a thin, watery stew of whatever vegetables are on hand, thickened with oats or stale bread. It simmers all day in a single pot over the fire. The pot is never truly emptied or cleaned. It's just perpetually topped up with new ingredients. Some historians say this practice of continuous cooking could lead to a surprisingly complex flavor over time, while others argue it was just a breeding ground for bacteria. Either way, it's the taste of your childhood, bland, gritty, and never quite enough. The real trouble started last month. Your father, his body worn down by years of labor and a constant cough, finally succumbed to a fever. He was buried in the small churchyard, his grave marked by a simple wooden cross that will likely rot away by next spring. Now, the full weight of survival has fallen on your mother's shoulders, and by extension on yours. The Lord's reeve has already come by, his face impassive, to remind you that the rent paid in grain is still due. The priest has hinted that the tithe is not a request, but a divine obligation. Desperation is a cold, quiet thing. It settles in the hut like the winter fog. You watch your younger siblings, their faces thin, their eyes too large. You watch your mother, weeping silently as she tries to mend a tunic that is more patched than original fabric. There is no way out. The village offers no opportunities. You will either starve slowly here, or you will be cast out when you can't pay the Lord. But then, a whisper of another world arrives. A traveling tinker, his cart laden with pots and pans, stops for a drink of water. He speaks of the city. He describes it not with the moralizing tone of the village priest who calls it a den of sin, but with a weary pragmatism. He talks of stone buildings, of 1,000 chimneys puffing smoke, of a market where you can buy things you've never even dreamed of. And he says, with a sideways glance at your uncombed hair and dirt-smudged face, that in the city, a clever, pretty girl can always find a way to earn silver. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. The idea is a dangerous seed. You'll look at rest, the bleak horizon. What is sin compared to the certainty of starvation? And here, in this moment of impossible choice, is a question that historians and sociologists still debate. How much of this decision is truly yours when every other door is bolted shut? Is walking through the only one left open an act of free will? Or is it merely the illusion of choice, a path dictated by a system that gave you no other cards to play that night? You don't sleep. You lie on your straw pallet, listening to the quiet breathing of your family, and you make a decision. Before the first hint of dawn, you take a small, smooth stone from the hearth, a keepsake from your father, and you slip out of the hut. You don't afford to. You don't afford to. You just turn your face towards the faint, distant glow that the tinker said was the city, and you begin to walk. The journey is longer and harder than you could have imagined. What the tinker described in a few casual sentences takes you days of walking. You follow muddy, rutted tracks that barely qualify as roads, sleeping in ditches or the hollows of old trees, clutching the smooth stone in your pocket for a sliver of comfort. The world, which had been so small, suddenly expands into a terrifyingly vast landscape. You learn to be invisible, to avoid the gaze of passing riders and to scurry away from farm dog. The hunger that was a dull ache in the village becomes a sharp, cramping pain in your stomach. Finally, you see it. First, it's a smudge on the horizon, a grey stain against the sky. Then, as you get closer, the city begins to take shape. It's not the glittering marvel the tinker described, but a chaotic, sprawling beast. A high stone wall, streaked with green moss and patched in a dozen places, encircles it like a shabby collar. And the smell hits you long before you reach the gates. It's a thick, overwhelming soup of wood smoke, human waste, livestock, rotting garbage, and 100 other unit and fightable odors, all mingling in the damp air. This is the first, unavoidable sensory assault of any medieval city. Your village smelled of earth and manure. This place smells of humanity, crammed together, a living, breathing, stinking organism. You slip through the main gate, trying to look like you belonged, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. Inside, the chaos is a physical force. The streets are narrow, winding alleys, not paved with stone but with a thick, sucking mud mixed with straw and refuse. People are everywhere, a jostling, shouting torrent of humanity. Merchants yell from their storefronts, children dart underfoot. A man pushes a cart piled high with dripping animal hide, and a flock of geese honks indignantly as it's herded through the crowd. Towering, timber-framed houses lean precariously over the street, their upper floors almost touching, casting the alleyways into a permanent, gloomy twilight. You are lost adrift in a sea of strangers. Everyone seems to have a purpose, a destination, and you have none. Your warm dress and bare feet mark you as an outsider, a peasant, and you draw suspicious, fleeting glances. After a day of aimless wandering, exhaustion and hunger drive you to the poorest, most neglected part of the city. Here, the buildings are even more dilapidated, the smell even more dilapidated, the smell even more potent. It's not an official district with a sign, but you know it when you see it. It's a certain street, perhaps near the city's outer wall or close to the docks, where the air feels different. Women loiter in doorways, their gazes more direct, more assessing than those of the other women you've seen. Their clothes are a strange mix of worn-out finery and practical drabness. They flash of a colorful ribbon, a slightly more revealing neckline on a simple tunic. These are the subtle signals. This is the place the tinker was talking about. Historians call these areas stews or shambles, names that evoke a sense of filth and chaos. And while some cities did try to confine prostitution to specific streets for control and, of course, for easier taxation, the reality was often much messier, spilling over into taverns, bathhouses, and any shadowy corner where a transaction could be made. You see a woman, not much older than you, laughing with a pair of grimy-looking sailors. Her laugh isn't joyful, it sounds brittle, a tool she's using. A little further down, an older woman with a face like a crumpled mat sits on a stool, watching everything with sharp, calculating eyes. This is likely the board, the madam or brothel keeper. She is the gatekeeper to this world. Summoning the last of your courage, you approach her. Your voice is a hoarse whisper when you ask if there is work. The woman looks you up and down, a slow, methodical appraisal. She's evaluating an asset. She checks your teeth, a common practice for assessing age and health. She notes your youth, the unblemished skin beneath the dirt, the fear in your eyes. Fear, she knows, can be useful. She doesn't offer you comfort or kindness. She lays out the rules in a blunt, transcational tone. You will live here in a room with 3 other girls. You will be given food, probably the same endless pottage you thought you'd left behind, but at least it's a full belly. You will be given clothes, simple but cleaner than what you're wearing. In return, every coin you earn, every single one goes to her first. She will take her very large cut and give you back a pittance for your own needs. If you cause trouble, you're out. If you get sick, you're out. If you displease a client, well, she leaves that threat hanging in the air. This is a strange and often misunderstood part of the medieval system. Prostitution was frequently legal, a necessary evil in the eyes of the church and city councils. The argument, famously articulated by theologians like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, was that it acted as a sewer, channeling male lust away from respectable women and preventing greater social chaos. So cities licensed brothels, taxed their income, and established specific rules. But this legality offered you, the individual woman, almost no protection. You were a source of revenue, a social pressure valve, but you were not a citizen with rights. You existed in a bizarre paradox, sanctioned, yet utterly condemned, part of the urban machine. The board points to a dark doorway. Go on then. Get cleaned up. Well, call Eugene, a new name for a new life. Your old name, the one your mother gave you, is gone. It's the first thing you lose. You step through the doorway, leaving the noisy street behind. The air inside is thick with the smell of cheap perfume, stale wine, and unwashed bodies. You hear the murmur of voices from other rooms, the creak of floorboards overhead. This isn't a new life. It's a new kind of cage. You are no longer starving, but you have a chilling feeling that you've just traded one form of desperation for another. The stone in your pocket suddenly feels very cold and very heavy. Your new name, Jean, feels like a costume you're forced to wear. The real you, the girl who knows the feel of soil and the names of wildflowers, is buried deep inside. Your days, which were once governed by the sun and seasons, are now governed by the whims of men and the clinking of coins. You learn quickly that being legal is a cruel joke. Yes, the city council in this particular town has designated this street for your trade. They collect a hefty tax from the board, a fact she complains about constantly. This makes your work, in a technical sense, a recognized part of the city's economy. But this official status does nothing to shield you from the contempt that drips from nearly every interaction. The respectable women of the city, the wives and daughters of merchants and craftsmen, pull their cloaks tight and hurry past your street, their faces a mask of pious disapproval. They might buy their bread from a baker with flour on his hands, their cloth from a weaver with lint in his hair, but they see you not as a worker, but as a walking embodiment of sin. The very existence of your trade is meant to protect their virtue, yet they are the first to condemn you for it. This is a cognitive dissonance that defined the era. Theologians and city fathers could write lengthy justifications for the necessity of prostitution, but on a human level, on the street, you are simply filth. The local priest, a man with a surprisingly florid face and plump fingers, delivers sermons every Sunday about the fires of damnation that await women like you. Yet, you learn to recognize the hooded cloak of his less pious colleague, who sometimes slips down the alley after the bells for vespers have faded. This hypocrisy is the bedrock of your new world. You are a service provider for a need that everyone acknowledges but no one will speak of in the light of day. You are, in the eyes of the law, a public woman. Femme public. This legal status is less about rights and more about regulations and restrictions. You are not allowed to wear the same fine clothes as honorable ladies. You cannot wear silk, fur, or certain expensive dyes. These are called some PTU laws, and they were designed to make social hierarchies instantly visible. While they applied to everyone, a merchant's wife cowled and dress like a duchess, the rules for you are especially degrading. They are designed to be a public badge of your station. In some cities, this meant wearing a striped hood, in others, a specific color of cloak. Here, it's a simple band of red ribbon, which the board insists you tie around your arm or in your hair whenever you are visible from the street. It's a marker, a brand. It says, I am available, but it also says I am other. I am less. Historians still debate the full extent and enforcement of the universally applied, or only enforced when a woman got out of line. It likely varied wildly from city to city, but the intent was always the same: to create a clear, visual line between the honorable and the shameful. Your life is confined to the street, this house. You are, for the most part, not welcome elsewhere. If you were to go to the main market, you deface insults or be driven away by merchants who fear your presence would tarnish their stores. The church is a place of particular anxiety. You are technically encouraged to attend Mass, to pray for repentance, but doing so means enduring the hostile stares and whispers of the congregation. You are caught in a trap, damned if you don't seek God, and shamed if you do. And the legality of your work offers our protection from violence. If a client is rough, if he refuses to pay, who can you complain to? The city watch. They are more likely to laugh at you or demand a free turn for their trouble than to dispense justice on your behalf. The board might intervene, but only if it affects her bottom line. A client who doesn't pay is bad for business. Your personal safety is not on her ledger. You quickly learn that your well-being is entirely your own responsibility, and you have no power and no allies. There's a strange, cold comfort in this shared existence, though. You are not the only one. In the quiet, pre-dawn hours, when the last client has stumbled out and the house is finally still, you and the other girls might share a hunk of bread or a watered-down cup of wine. You learn their real names, the ones they left behind in villages just like yours. There's Elodie, who ran from a brutal apprenticeship. There's Marguerite, whose family sold her into it. You don't talk about hope or the future. You talk about the cruelties of the day, a client who is surprisingly gentle, a new rip in your only good tunic. This is the reality of your legal but despised status. You are a cog in the city's machine, a taxable commodity, a social necessity. But you are not a person, you are a function, a symbol. And as you lie on your thin straw mattress, listening to the snores and quiet sobs of the other girls in the room, you feel a profound sense of dislocation. You are more visible than ever, mobbed and paraded for all to see, yet you have never felt so completely invisible. The girl who left her village seeking survival has found it, but the price is a kind of social death, a life lived in the full glare of the public eye, yet completely in the shadows. The red ribbon becomes a part of you. You tie it onto your sleeve in the morning, and it feels like you're putting on a shackle. It's a cheap, simple piece of dyed cloth, but its power is immense. When you're inside the dim, smoky confines of the brothel, you are just Jean. But the moment you step into the doorway, framed for the view of the street, the ribbon transforms you. You are no longer a person, you are a product on display. This practice of marking prostitutes was widespread across medieval Europe, a visual shorthand for a complex social status. The current item varied from place to place. In some French cities, it was a special badge you had to sew onto your shoulder. In parts of Germany, a yellow veil or scarf. In London, a striped hood of rayon, a cheap, multicolored fabric. The choice of red in your new city is common. It's a color of passion, of sin, of the flames of hellfire that the priests so vividly describe. It's also just a bright, eye-catching color, a practical way to advertise from a distance. The board is militant about the ribbon. It's not just about conforming to the city ordinance, it's about business. The ribbon removes all ambiguity. Eamon walking down the street doesn't have to guess or risk the embarrassment of propositioning a respectable woman. The ribbon does the talking. It's a silent, constant solicitation, but for you, it's a public declaration of your shame. It erases any possibility of anonymity. You can't just be a young woman walking to the well or standing in a doorway. The ribbon ensures you are always, first and foremost, a prostitute. This branding creates a strange and suffocating existence. Your world shrinks to the confines of the house and the few feet of street outside its door. On the rare occasions the board sends you on an errand to the baker for stale bread at the end of the day, or to the tavern for a jug of cheap wine, the ribbon is your curse. Other women pull their children away from you. Men who wouldn't dare meet your eyes when their wives are near give you leering, speculative looks. You are a public spectacle. There's a bizarre and little-known flip side to these clothing laws. While you were forbidden from wearing the attire of honest women, the reverse was also true. A respectable woman could be punished if she was caught wearing the designated markers of a prostitute. There are actual court records of women being fined or publicly shamed for, say, wearing a striped hood in a part of town where that was the sign of the trade. It was seen as a deceitful act, a blurring of the sacred line between the virtuous and the fallen. It shows how obsessed the medieval social order was with clear, visible distinctions. Everyone had a place, and your clothing was your uniform, telling the world exactly where you fit. Life in the brothel is a monotonous routine punctuated by moments of fear. You wake late, long after the rest of the city has started its day. The mornings are for mending clothes, for the endless futile task of trying to wash the grime and the smell of stale wine out of your one or two tunics. The bod distributes the day's single meal around you, and usually the familiar, flavorless pottage, sometimes with a piece of hard cheese if business has been good. Then, as the afternoon wears on, you are expected to make yourself visible. You sit on a stool, in the doorway, or lean from a first-floor window, the red ribbon prominent on your arm. You learn to read the men who walk past. You see the hesitation in a young apprentice's step, the furtive glance of a married merchant, the boisterous swagger of a soldier with a few coins to spend. You learn to smile when you want to scream, to feign interest when you feel nothing but emptiness. Each transaction is a small death, a chipping away at the girl you used to be. The stone from your father's hearth, which you now keep hidden in a small cloth bag under your mattress, is your only link to that forgotten self. The ribbon is also a source of conflict within the house. Elodie, who is bolder and more desperate, sometimes tries to flout the rules. She'll add a bit of prohibited lace to her collar or try to arrange her hair in a style worn by merchants' daughters, hoping to attract a wealthier client. The board's reaction is swift and brutal. They sharp slap a torrent of abuse, and the offending lace is ripped away. Do you want to get us all thrown in the stocks? Shall screech. The rules are the rules for a reason. The board isn't afraid of the law for moral reasons, she's afraid of it for financial ones. Fines, temporary closure of the house, unwanted attention from the city guard, all of these disrupt her income. Your obedience is essential to her business. And so the red ribbon is not just a symbol of your social station imposed from the outside, it's a tool of control used from the inside. It keeps you in line, reminds you of your place, and reinforces the walls of the invisible prison you now inhabit. As you tie the ribbon on each day, you sometimes wonder about the person who made it. Was it a weaver in another part of the city? Did they know what their bolts of red cloth were being used for? Did they care? Or was it just another job, another length of fabric to be sold? You are trapped in a system where everyone plays their part, from the priest who condemns you to the weaver who supplies the tools of your trade. And you, with this simple piece of red cloth on your arm, are at the very bottom your arm, the branded, visible, and utterly powerless centerpiece of it all. The house is its own tiny, suffocating kingdom, and the other women are your fellow subjects. They are not your friends, but in the way you once understood the word. The girls in your village shared secrets, laughter, and chores. The women here share a roof, a profession, and a common state of despair. This shared experience creates a bond, but it's a fragile one, constantly strained by rivalry and the raw mechanics of survival. You are all in this together, but you are also all in it for yourselves. There's Marguerite, the one whose family sold her. She is quiet and perpetually sad, moving through the house like a ghost. She does her work with a vacant expression, as if she has learned to send her mind somewhere else entirely. She reminds you of a wounded bird, and your first instinct is to offer comfort, a kind word. But you quickly learn that kindness can be mistaken for weakness here. The one time you tried to share a bit of your bread with her, the board saw it and cuffed you on the head, accusing you of wasting assets. Then there's Elodie, the bold one. She is sharp-tongued and cynical, her eyes missing nothing. She was an apprentice to a seamstress, she told you once in a rare moment of candor, but fled after the master's endless, unwelcome advances. She carries her anger like a shield. Elodie is the one who understands the brutal economy of the house best. She knows which clients are likely to have an extra coin, and she knows how to position herself in the doorway to catch their eye first. She is your direct competitor. If a wealthy-looking merchant walks down the street, both you and Elodie will straighten up, force a smile, and try to be the one he chooses. His choice means a slightly better meal for one of you, or perhaps a few hoarded pennies that the board doesn't know about. This constant, no-level competition erodes any chance of genuine solidarity. You live in a single, crowded room in the attic. The roof leaks when it rains, and the straw-stuffed mattresses on the floor are alive with fleas. There is no privacy. You dress and undress in front of each other, you hear each other's nightmares. This forced intimacy is a strange thing. You know that Marguerite cries silently into her pillow almost every night. You know that Elodie has a small, carved wooden bird she hides from the board. You all know each other's deepest vulnerabilities, yet you rarely acknowledge them. To do so would be to acknowledge your own, and that is a luxury no one can afford. The board, whose name you've learned is Isabel, rules this little fiefdom with an iron fist. She is a fascinating and terrifying figure. She was once a girl like you. You can see it in the faint traces of beauty in her ruined face, in the way she sometimes stares into the distance with a flicker of old pain. But any softness she might have once possessed has been burned away, leaving only a core of hardened pragmatism. She is a survivor who has clawed her way up from the bottom to a position of petty power. This is one of the few career paths available to a woman in your position if you live long enough and are ruthless enough. You might one day run a house of your own. This progression from victim to perpetrator is a dark, recurring theme in the history of this trade. Isabella's relationship with you all is complex. She is your jailer, your exploiter. But on rare occasions she can also be your protector. If a client becomes truly dangerous, throwing furniture or drawing a knife, she will be the first one there. Her voice a terrifying screech, backed up by a couple of brutish men she keeps on her payroll. Her protection, however, is not for you. It's for her property. A damaged girl can turn. A smashed-up room costs money to fix. Her intervention is purely a business decision. Here's a peculiar detail of this life, the bathish. While the church condemned them as dens of iniquity, many medieval towns had public bathhouses. For most citizens, it was a place for hygiene and socializing. For you, it was a work venue. Isabel sometimes sends one of you to the local bathish. As clients, there often expected female companionship. But it was also one of the few places you could experience the simple, profound pleasure of being submerged in hot water. In a life defined by filth and grime, those moments of cleanliness were a fleeting, almost spiritual form of relief. The relationships between you and the other girls are a constant dance of alliance and betrayal. One day Elodie might warn you that a certain client is known for not paying. The next day, she might whisper a lie to Isabel about you, hoping to get you in trouble and claim a better spot in the doorway for herself. You learn to be wary, to hold your tongue, to trust no one completely. This atmosphere of suspicion is one of Isabella's most effective tools of control. You will never unite against her. It's a classic tactic of the powerful, played out in miniature in this dingy, forgotten corner of a medieval city. And so you exist, side by side, sharing the same space, the same work, the same fate. You are sisters in circumstance, but not in spirit. You are a collection of lonely islands, huddled together in the same dark, polluted sea. The money is a ghost. You see it, you touch it, but you can almost never hold on to it. A client, perhaps a weaver with chalk dust on his hands or a young stonemason's apprentice, places a few small, dull-looking coins into your hand. For a fleeting moment, they are yours. They feel heavy, real. They represent a brief release from this suffocating house, a loaf of bread that isn't stale, maybe even a new ribbon to replace the frayed one on your arm. But this feeling of ownership lasts only as long as it takes you to walk from the client's room back to the main hall where Isabel is waiting. Her hand is always out. It's a permanent gesture, as much a part of her as her scowl. You are required to turn over every single coin immediately. There is no negotiation. She counts the money, her lips moving silently, her eyes sharp and assessing. She's not just counting, she's calculating. She knows the going rate, what a quick tumble with a soldier should fetch versus a longer encounter with a traveling merchant. If the amount seems low, she'll grill you. Did you let him short you? Don't be a fool. Girl, you're no good to me if you're a fool. After she takes the money, the accounting begins. It's a cruel, one-sided piece of financial theater. All right, Jean, she'll say, her voice dripping with false magnanimity, as if she's doing you a great favor. Let's see what you owe. First, there's the roof fee. This is for your spot on the flea-infested mattress. Then there's the food fee, for your daily bowl of watery pottage. There's a candle fee, for the light in the house, and a water fee, for the luxury of washing. She has a name for every possible expense, real or imagined. The most insulting one is the protection fee, for the privilege of having her brutish thugs on standby. By the time she's finished with her deductions, the small pile of coins has dwindled to almost nothing. She might push one or two tiny copper coins back across the table to you. This is your share. It's barely enough to buy a handful of nuts from a street vendor. This system of debt bondage was the invisible chain that kept many women trapped. You work constantly in debt to the board for your own upkeep. You could work for years and never get ahead, never save enough to leave. Leaving would mean walking out with nothing but the clothes on your back, facing starvation again. Isabel owned you, not through legal slavery, but through a carefully constructed web of debt. This is a point where history gets murky and sparks debate. Some historical accounts, often written by moralizing male clerics, portray all bawdees as monstrously greedy exploiters, but other sources, including some rare court records where prostitutes themselves gave testimony, suggest a more complex picture. Was it possible for a woman to save money? Could she buy her way out in some, perhaps exceedingly rare, circumstances? A particularly savvy or favored woman might have been able to accumulate a small nest egg. But for the vast majority, like you, the system was designed to keep you poor and dependent. The dream of saving up enough to start a new life was, for most, just that, a dream. You learn to be cunning. You discover the art of the secret economy. Maybe a client, in a moment of drunken sentimentality or genuine pity, presses an extra coin into your hand and whispers, "This is a moment of pure, heart-stopping risk. You have to hide it, and quickly." Perhaps you slip it into your shoe, or into a hidden fold of your tunic. The challenge then is to get it from your hiding place to a safe one without Isabel seeing. You've created a small, loose stone in the wall behind your mattress. Inside that tiny cavity is your treasure, a handful of coins that are truly yours. It's a pathetic hoard, but it feels like a dragon's wealth. It represents a sliver of autonomy, a secret act of rebellion. One of the strangest things you have to spend your meager earnings on is soap. This is a fascinating little detail of medieval life. Soap existed, but it was often a harsh, lye-based substance, usually made from animal fat and dash. It wasn't the sweet-smelling bar we know today. For you, however, even this coarse soap was a necessity. Isabel didn't provide it, that was your own expense. Buying a small, greasy block of it felt like an indulgence, but it was also a trade. It was a way to wash away the grime, the smell of clients, to feel human again for a few brief moments. The other girls jealously guard their own small pieces of soap. It's one of the few forms of personal property you all possess. The coins you manage to hide become your secret obsession. At night, you might reach into the wall and just hold them, feeling their cool, metallic reality in your palm. You don't even know what you'd do with them. It's not enough to buy your freedom, not even close, but it's proof. It's proof that despite the ribbons, the rules, and the relentless exploitation, a tiny part of you is still your own. In a life where your body is a commodity and your time is sold, these few stolen coins are the only things you truly possess. They are the seeds of a hope you barely dare to acknowledge, a whisper that one day, you might find a way to walk away from this life your own person once more. Isabel lines you all up once a week for the health check. It's a humiliating ritual performed not with the intention of care, but as a crude form of quality control. The city, in its paradoxical way of managing the trade, sometimes mandated these inspections. The idea was to prevent the spread of disease, a concept they barely understood, and to ensure the clients were getting a clean product. The practice sounds progressive, like an early form of public health, but the reality for you is anything but. The doctor is not a learned physician from the university. HES, a barber surgeon, a tradesman who specializes in bloodletting, tooth pulling, and other minor procedures. His hands are rough, his fingernails dirty, and he smells faintly of stale blood and wine. He arrives with an air of bored authority, treating you not as patients, but as livestock to be inspected. Isabel pays him a small fee for his services. Another expense shall later deduct from your non-existent earnings. You stand in a line wearing only thin shifts while he gives each of you a cursory look over. He peers into your eyes, makes you stick out your tongue, and checks your skin for any obvious sores or rashes. The entire process is steeped in the flawed medical theories of the time, based on the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. He might ask if you've been feeling melancholic, too much black bile, or if you have a fever and excess of blood. His remedies, should he find anything amiss, are as useless as his diagnosis. He might prescribe a foul-tasting herbal concoction, or his favorite solution for almost everything, a bit of bloodletting to rebalance the humours. This entire charade is a perfect example of medieval medical theatre. There was no understanding of germs, viruses, or the true nature of sexually transmitted diseases. They did, however, understand leprosy, and a great deal of the fear around illness was tied to it. But they had no way of diagnosing conditions like syphilis, which some historians argue became rampant in Europe only after the 1492, or gonorrhea. The checkup is based on pure superstition and visual inspection. It can't detect a latent illness or an internal problem. Its real purpose is to create the illusion of safety, both for the clients and for the city authorities. Isabel can claim her girls are certified clean. For you, it's a moment of profound vulnerability and dread. You stand there, exposed and silent, as this man scrutinizes your body for any imperfection that could get you thrown out onto the street. A simple rash from the filthy bedding, an insect bite, anything could be misinterpreted as a sign of a dreaded disease. You hold your breath, praying he sees nothing wrong. Here's a truly bizarre and specific detail from this world: the use of tota, a kind of medieval makeup. While you were forbidden from wearing the fine clothes of respectable ladies, some prostitutes used crude cosmetics to appear healthier and more appealing. This wasn't the sophisticated makeup of the nobility. It was often a dangerous mixture of ingredients. To achieve a pale complexion, which was highly fashionable, women might use a powder made from Leda's slow-acting poison. To add a rosy blush to their cheeks and lips, they might use vermilion, which is derived from mercury, another toxic substance. So in an attempt to look healthy for the inspection and for clients, you might literally be poisoning yourself. It's a tragic irony: the very act of faking health could be the cause of your future sickness. The debate among historians here revolves around the true intent of these checks. Were they a genuine, if misguided, public health effort, or were they simply another to love control? A way to reinforce the power of the city and the board over the women? The answer is likely both. The city officials probably believed they were protecting the populace, while for Isabel, it was a business necessity and a way to remind you all that your physical bodies were her assets, subject to her inspection and approval. One day, Elodie has a small boil on her neck. It's a simple, harmless thing, probably from a dirty collar. But as the barber surgeon approaches her, you can see the panic in her eyes. She tries to cover it with her hair, but he roughly pushes it aside. He grunts, pokes at it, and declares that Chesson Cleanand must be isolated. Isabel doesn't argue. She immediately pulls Elodie from the line. For the next week, Elodie is confined to a tiny, windowless storeroom, given only scraps of food. She is not being treated, she is being quarantined like a sick animal until the problem goes away. If it hadn't, she would have been cast out without a second thought. The experience solidifies a terrifying truth in your mind. Your health, your very physical integrity, is not your own. It is a condition of your employment. Sickness is not met with care, but with punishment and expulsion. You are only as valuable as your last healthy day. After the barber surgeon leaves, reeking of self-importance, you are allowed to get dressed again. But the feeling of being violated, of being reduced to a mere collection of flesh and bone to be appraised, lingers long after. He is gone after he is gone. You feel a desperate, primal urge to be healthy, not for your own sake but out of sheer, animal fear of the consequences of being otherwise. The nights are a blur of faces, each one blending into the next. They come at all hours, but the busiest time is after the final church bells have rung for the day, plunging the city into a deep, unlit darkness. In the medieval city, night is a different world. There are no street halted. The only illumination comes from the moon if it's out, or the occasional lantern carried by the city watch or a wealthy citizen with a private guard. This darkness provides a cloak of anonymity, perfect for men who want to frequent a place like Isabel S. without being recognized. The clients are a cross-section of the city's male population, a secret slice of the society that publicly scorns you. There are young apprentices, their hands still soft, spending the first coins they've ever earned for themselves. They are often nervous, giggling and awkward, their bravado a thin mask for their inexperience. You learn to be gentle with them, to guide the encounter with a practiced, weary patience. Their fumbling attempts at worldliness are almost pitiable. Then there are the soldiers. They come in loud, boisterous groups, fresh from the garrison or back from some minor skirmish you know nothing about. They smell of sweat, leather and cheap ale. They are rougher, more demanding, and they pay in the clipped, impatient manner of men used to taking what they want. With them you learn to be firm, to project an aura of control you don't actually feel. Showing fear is an invitation for cruelty. The best you can hope for is a quick, uncompleted transaction. The most common clients are the ordinary men of the city, the craftsmen, the shopkeepers, the laborers. These are the men you might see in the market during the day, men with wives and children at home. They often try to maintain a fiction of distance. They don't use your name. They rarely speak. They come for a purely physical release, a service rendered in near silence. They are a reminder of the deep hypocrisy of this world, where the very men who uphold the social order are the ones who frequent its underbelly. You are their silent, unnamed collaborator in this shared secret. And then there are the clergy. This is the most dangerous and controversial secret of the house. Though the church was the most powerful institution condemning your trade, celibacy was a difficult and often ignored rule. Men of the cloth were still men. They come late, their faces hidden in the deep shadows of their hoods. They are often the most conflicted clients. This can make them unpredictable. Some are surprisingly tender, seeking a form of intimacy and confession they can find nowhere else. Others are filled with self-loathing that they project onto you, their words turning cruel and contemptuous even in the midst of the act they solicited. Isabel charges them double. A strange and specific bit of lore from this time is the concept of the sin eater. This was a person in some rural folk traditions who would be paid to ritually eat the sins of a deceased person by consuming a meal over their corpse. While a different practice, you sometimes feel like a living version of that. Men come to you to unload their lust, their loneliness, their frustrations, their guilt. You are expected to absorb it all. To be a vessel for the desires they cannot acknowledge in their real lives. You are a confessor who offers not absolution, but a temporary physical oblivion. The debate among historians on this topic is lively. Just how common was it for clergy to frequent brothels? Official church records are, unsurprisingly, silent on the matter. But satirical poems, court documents detailing scandals, and popular literature of the period are filled with stories of lecherous priests and monks. The stereotype of the hypocritical cleric was a stock character in medieval society. While it's impossible to know the exact numbers, the anecdotal evidence suggests it was a known, if officially denied, reality. It was an open secret that everyone knew and no one spoke of. One night, a man comes in who is different. He is a traveling merchant, you can tell by his fine, though road-dusted, cloak and the soft leather of his boots. He is older with sad eyes. He doesn't want the usual transaction. He pays Isabel for an hour of your time, but all he wants to do is talk. He sits on the edge of the lumpy mattress in your small room and tells you about his wife who died of a fever, about his children who are grown and gone, asking your name, your real name, not Jean. You hesitate, then whisper the name you haven't said aloud in months. For a short while, in the flickering candlelight, you feel a flicker of your old self. You are not a body for sale. You are a girl from a village, listening to a sad old man's story. The encounter is chaste, strangely intimate, and more unsettling than any of the purely physical ones. It's a reminder of the normal human connection that your life is built around the absence of. When he leaves, he presses a silver coin into your hand, a small fortune, and tells you to keep it for yourself. You manage to hide it before Isabel can see, your heart hammering with the thrill and the terror of it. That night, sleep doesn't come. You lie awake thinking not of the silver, but of the strange, painful gift of being seen, for just a moment, as a human being again. It's a crack in the hardened shell you've built around yourself, and you're not sure if it's a blessing or a curse. Time in the house has a strange quality. Days bleed into nights, weeks into months. The seasons change outside the grimy windows, but inside, the rhythm of life remains the same. You mark the passage of time not by a calendar, but by the cycles of your own body. It is the one clock you have that is intimately undone-shakably yours. And then, 1 month, the clock stopped. At first, you don't let yourself it's late. It's been late before. Your diet is poor. Your life is stressful, such irregularities are common. You push the thought to the back of your mind, a small, dark seed of worry that you refuse to water. You go about your work, forcing the usual smiles, enduring the usual encounters, all while a silent, frantic counting is happening in the back of your head. It's only been a few days, but tomorrow comes, and the next day, and the day after that. The small seed of worry begins to sprout, sending out cold tendrils of fear that wrap around your heart. You start to notice other, more subtle changes. A new tenderness in your breasts. A wave of nausea in the morning that you struggle to hide, blaming it on the stale bread from the night before. A profound, bone-deep weariness that has nothing to do with the usual exhaustion of your life. The realization dawns not as a sudden crash, but as a slow creeping tide of absolute terror. Pregnancy. For any woman in the Middle Ages, this was a life-threatening prospect. Childbirth was a brutal, dangerous affair with mortality rates that are staggering to a modern mind. But for a woman in your position, it is not just a risk. It is a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe. It is a death sentence for the life you have, however miserable it may be. Your mind races, a trapped animal in a cage. You cannot work if you are pregnant. Your changing body would be impossible to hide, and no client would want you. The moment Isabel found out, you would be thrown out. Not out of malice necessarily, but out of cold, hard business logic. You would become a useless asset, a liability. You would be cast out onto the street with no home, no money, and no way to earn any. A pregnant, destitute woman is the most vulnerable creature in the city. The fear is so immense, it's paralyzing. You lie on your mattress at night, one hand resting on your still flat stomach, and you feel a profound sense of alienation from your own body. It has betrayed you. It has betrayed you. It has become a ticking clock, counting down not to a joyful birth, but to your complete and utter ruin. This is the central brutal paradox of your existence. In a society that venerates motherhood, that sees a woman's primary purpose as bearing children, especially sons, your fertility is your greatest curse. The Virgin Mary is the ultimate female ideal, the mother, but you are her dark reflection, the whore of Babylon. For a respectable woman, pregnancy is a fulfillment of her sacred duty. For you, it is the ultimate sin made flesh, a physical manifestation of your shame that will destroy you. You look at the other girls in the house with new eyes. You wonder, has this happened to them? Marguerite's perpetual sadness suddenly takes on a new, more terrible possible meaning. Did she once face this choice? You want to ask. To share this terrifying secret, but you can't. Admitting it would be like speaking a curse into existence. And who could you trust? Elodie, in her cynical struggle for survival, might see your secret as an opportunity, a way to get rid of a competitor. She might whisper it to Isabel, so you keep it locked inside, a growing, suffocating secret. One of the great historical silences surrounds the issue of contraception in this era. The Church condemned it unequivocally as a sin, a frustration of God's procreative purpose. Yet, historians know from clerical manuals and penitential books that guided priests on assigning penance for various sins that people were clearly attempting it. These texts list penances for using malefic, i.e. evil spells or potions to prevent conception. What were these methods? They were likely a mix of superstition and folk medicine, potions made from herbs like Queen Anne's lace or silphium, a plant that was driven to extinction, possibly because it was such an effective, and therefore popular, contraceptive and abortifacient. Did women in your position have access to this kind of knowledge? It's a subject of intense debate. This knowledge was clandestine, passed down through networks of women, and highly unreliable. A transplant from a rural village with no connections in the city, such secrets would be almost impossible to access. You feel utterly, terrifyingly alone. Every meal you eat feels like you're feeding the enemy within. Every passing day, you study your reflection in a bucket of murky water, searching for the first visible signs of the disaster unfolding inside you. The red ribbon on your arm, once a symbol of your public shame, now feels secondary. The real brand, the one that will truly seal your fate, is the invisible one growing in your womb. The daily threats of your life, a violent client, the cruelty of the board, the pangs of hunger all fade in comparison to this slow, silent, and inexorable biological threat. You have survived poverty, homelessness, and exploitation, but you have a sinking feeling that this quiet, internal process might be the one thing you cannot survive. The panic solidifies into a desperate, frantic resolve. You cannot let this happen. You have to do something, but what your mind, steeped in the folk traditions of your village and the hushed gossip of the city, turns to the only solution you can imagine: herbs. There are whispers, always whispers, of certain plants, of wise women who know their secrets, of concoctions that can bring on a woman's courses. This is your only hope, a slim, dangerous lifeline in a sea of despair. Getting this knowledge is a perilous quest in itself. You can't just ask openly. In the eyes of the Church, seeking to end a pregnancy is a grave sin, perilously close to witchcraft. Isabel would see it as a sign of trouble and a threat to her business. You have to be subtle. You start listening more intently to the conversations of other women, not just the girls in the house, but the market women, the laundresses you see by the river. You're listening for a name, for a hint, for any scrap of forbidden knowledge. You use one of your precious hidden coins to buy a meat pie from a vendor, a woman with knowing eyes and a network of gossip as wide as the city itself. While you eat, you complain about a blockage, a woman's trouble, keeping your language deliberately vague. The woman looks at you, her gaze sharp, and for a tense moment, you think she'll raise the alarm. Instead, she lowers her voice and mutters a few words. Penurial, she says, or rue. But be careful, girl. Armed with these names, you now face the second hurdle: acquiring them. These aren't herbs sold openly in the market for such purposes. Penurial is a type of mint, and rue is a bitter, strong-smelling herb. You might find them in an apothecary's shop, but a young woman from your street buying them would raise immediate suspicion. Your best bet is to find them growing wild, or in someone's private garden. This leads to you taking a terrible risk. You sneak out of the house one afternoon, telling Isabel you're going to the public well. Instead, you sift through the back alleys to the edge of the city, near the walls, where small, private herb gardens are tended by monks or wealthy citizens. Your heart pounds with every step. If you're caught, you could be accused of theft or worse, of witchcraft. You feel like a spy in a foreign land, your eyes scanning every green patch. In a neglected corner behind a small chapel, you see it, a plant with bluish-green, feathery leaves that you recognize from the pie seller's description as rue. Your hands tremble as you break off a few small branches, hiding them in your sleeve. Back in the suffocating privacy of the brothel, you prepare the potion. You have no recipe, no guide, only the woman's warning ringing in your ears: too much is a poison. How much is too much? You boil the bitter leaves in a small pot of water over a hidden, smoky fire, the acrid smell filling your small corner of the attic. The resulting liquid is a murky, foul-smelling tea. Holding your breath, you drink it. The effects are not immediate. For hours nothing happens and your hope begins to curdle back into despair. Then, the cramping starts. It's a violent, tearing pain in your abdomen, far worse than anything you've ever experienced. You curl into a ball on your mattress, biting down on a piece of cloth to keep from screaming, praying that Isabel and the other girls think you're just suffering from a stomach ailment. You are racked with waves of pain, nausea, and a terrifying, dizzying weakness. This is the reality of these medieval abortifacients. Women were playing a desperate form of Russian roulette with their own bodies. Herbs like penurial rue and tansy contain compounds like poolgon and penurial that can induce uterine contractions, but they are also powerful toxins. The line between a dose that might tend to pregnancy and a dose that would cause liver failure, kidney damage, or death was incredibly thin and largely unknown. The women who used them were poisoning themselves, hoping the poison would kill the pregnancy before it killed them. Historians studying medieval medical texts and herbals find these plants mentioned frequently, but often with coded language. They are described as emmenagogic substances that stimulate menstrual flow rather than explicitly as abortifacients. This allowed the knowledge to be recorded without directly challenging the Church's doctrine. The debate among scholars centers on how effective these methods actually were. Many argued that they were highly unreliable and more likely to make the woman gravely ill than to successfully terminate a pregnancy. Success stories were likely the rare exception, while the many failures and deaths went unrecorded. As you lie there sweating and shivering in agony, you don't know if the potion is working or if you are simply dying. The pain is all-consuming. You are alone with it, in the dark, unable to call for help. This is the price of your secret, the consequence of your desperate gamble. You have turned your own body into a battleground, and as the hours wear on, with the cramps showing no sign of abating, you are no longer certain which side you were fighting for. The hope of a solution has been replaced by the raw, immediate terror of a self-inflicted poisoning. The herbal poison eventually recedes, leaving you weak, trembling, and utterly drained. But the central, terrifying problem remains. The potion did not work. You are still pregnant, the desperate gamble failed, and you are left with fewer options and even less time. The initial signs are becoming harder to hide. The morning sickness is more persistent. The exhaustion a heavy cloak you can't shrug off. Elodie has started giving you sharp, speculative looks. You know your time is running out. Your mind, now frantic, turns to the last, most terrifying resort you've heard whispered about in the darkest corners of the house. This is a step beyond herbs, beyond anything you could do yourself. This requires another person. It requires finding a wise woman, a midwife, or perhaps someone the village priest would call a witch. You need to find someone who performs the operation. This is the shadow side of the midwife's profession. In medieval society, the midwife, or sage femme, was a central figure in a woman's life. She was present at every birth, an experienced, respected member of the female community. Her knowledge of childbirth was passed down through generations, a practical skill set that most male physicians lacked and disdained. But this very power, this exclusive access to the world of women's bodies, also made her a figure of suspicion. If a midwife knew how to bring a child into the world, it was reasoned she must also know how to prevent one from arriving. When a birth went wrong, when a mother or child died, it was easy to blame the midwife. When a woman mysteriously ceased to be pregnant, suspicion would naturally fall on the one person with the means and knowledge to intervene. The line between a trusted healer and a feared witch was perilously thin, and many women were accused of witchcraft for possessing exactly this kind of forbidden, female-centric knowledge. Finding such a person is like searching for a ghost. These practitioners operated in the deepest secrecy, for the penalty for their work was severe not just for them, but for you. Under both church law and increasingly secular law, abortion was considered a crime, often equated with homicide. To seek one out was to risk everything. Your desperate search leads you back to the city's margins. You use your last hidden coin, the precious silver from the kind merchant, to bribe an old laundress by the river. You don't ask directly. You speak of a friend, a young married woman whose husband is at sea, who has a terrible growth in her belly that must be removed for her health. The laundress looks at you, her face unreadable. She takes the coin and gives you a location, a small, isolated hut in the swampy and just outside the city walls, a place respectable folk avoid. She tells you to go at dusk and to bring a bottle of wine. The hut is even more wretched than you imagined. It's a hovel of mud and sticks, smoke curling from a hole in the roof. An old woman, her face a web of wrinkles and her eyes as sharp and black as a crow's, opens the door before you even knock. She is the midwife you've been sent to, but she looks more like the witches from scary stories. She takes the wine without a word and gestures for you to come inside. The room is dark, cluttered with bundles of dried herbs, strange-looking tools, and the overwhelming smell of wood smoke and something else. Something metallic and unsettling. She doesn't ask your name or your story. She knows why you're here. She names her price, an amount so impossibly high it makes you dizzy. It would take you a year of saving every secret coin to pay it. Seeing your despair, she offers another option. You can work off the debt. You can bring her a share of your earnings for the next. She doesn't say how long. It's an indefinite period of servitude. You have no choice. You agree. What happens next is a blur of terror and pain. There is no anesthetic, no concept of antiseptic care. The operation is a brutal, invasive procedure performed with crude, non-sterilized instruments. The midwife might use a sharpened piece of wood or metal, a probe she calls a bodkin. Her methods are a closely guarded, dangerous secret. Historians have to piece together what these procedures might have been like from condemnations in theological texts and the records of witchcraft trials. These sources are hostile and biased, but they hint at a grim reality of dangerous, painful, and often deadly interventions. The risk of hemorrhage, infection, and permanent internal injury was astronomical. You are made to lie down on a dirty pallet. The old woman's touch is not gentle, it is pragmatic, her movements swift and practiced. The pain is blinding, a violation so profound it eclipses everything else. It is far worse than the herbal poisoning, a direct, physical tearing that you are certain you will not survive. You bite down on a leather strap she gives you, the taste of it filling your mouth, your knuckles white as you grip the edges of the pallet. You are dimly aware that the debate about the personhood of a fetus has been raging for centuries. Theologians like Thomas Aquinas all meant the moment the fetus receives a soul happened at 40 days for a male and 80 or 90 days for a female. Before this quickening, ending a pregnancy was considered a lesser sin, but as you lie there, in an agony you could never have imagined, these theological debates are meaningless. This is not an abstract argument. This is a desperate, violent act of survival born of a terror so complete that it makes you willing to risk your own life, to endure this butchery, for the slimmest chance of reclaiming your future. You are not just trying to remove a pregnancy, you are trying to cut out the catastrophe that has taken root inside you. And as you feel a final, wrenching tear and a warm gush of blood, you pass out, not knowing if you have succeeded, or if you have just paid the ultimate price for your desperation. You wake up to the feeling of damp straw and a dull, throbbing ache deep within your body. The old woman is gone. For a terrifying moment, you think she has abandoned you in the hut to die. But then you see her, silhouetted against the dying fire, stirring the pot. She gives you a cup of a bitter, lukewarm broth and a piece of hard, stale bread. You are alive. The bleeding, she tells you in a gruff, matter-of-fact tone, has mostly stopped. You have been lucky. She doesn't use the word lucky, but it hangs in the air between you. You both know you could have bled to death on her flaw of fate that befell many other desperate girls who sought her out. You stay in the hut for 2 days, hidden from the world, a ghost in the swamp. You are weak, feverish, and in constant pain. The old woman tends to you with a detached, impersonal efficiency, changing the soiled rags between your legs and forcing you to drink more of her all-tasting herbal teas. This isn't kindness, it's an investment. She needs you well enough to go back to work so you can start paying off your immense debt to her. Returning to the brothel is one of the hardest things you've ever had to do. You stumble through the back alleys, your body screaming with every step. You have to pretend that you are fine, that you were simply away for a day or two, Perhaps visiting a fictional sick relative. A lie. Isabel accepts with a suspicious grunt, caring less about the truth and more about the fact that you're back and available to earn. Now begins a new, agonizing chapter of your life, the performance of being well. You must hide the evidence of what you've been through. Every movement is a carefully managed effort. You walk slowly, trying to conceal the pain that radiates from your core. You sit down carefully, biting your lip to keep from wincing. You force yourself to eat Isabel's pottage, even though the thought of food makes you nauseous, because refusing it would be a sign of illness. Your pregnancy was a secret of the mind and subtle chemistry. This is a secret of the flesh. Your body is a map of your ordeal, and you must keep it covered at all times. The other girls, particularly Elodie, watch you with an unnerving intensity. They notice your pallor, the new shadows under your eyes, the way you guard your movements. They whisper among themselves. Does Elodie suspect the truth, or does she think you are merely sick with a common ailment you can't tell? And the uncertainty is a constant source of anxiety. The greatest challenge is hiding your condition from clients. You have to endure their touch, their weight, while your body is a landscape of internal wounds. Each encounter is a fresh agony, a risk of reopening the barely healed damage inside you. You learn to use tricks, to position your body in ways that minimize the pain, to use the darkness of the small rooms to your advantage, hiding your grimaces and trembling. You feel a profound and horrifying disconnect from your own physical self. It is no longer a part of you. It is a broken thing you must manage, a treacherous vessel you have to pilot through dangerous waters. This period of hiding a secret, debilitating physical condition was a grim reality for many in the past, not just women in your situation. Consider a knight wounded in battle. He might have to hide the severity of his injury to maintain his reputation as a strong warrior, or a craftsman with a developing, chronic illness might hide his weakness from his guild for fear of losing his livelihood. The medieval world was harsh, and showing physical vulnerability could mean losing your status, your income, your very place in society. Your situation is an extreme, gendered version of this common struggle. And what if it hadn't worked? What if the midwife's brutal intervention had failed? Your mind briefly, morbidly, considers the alternative for as long as possible. This was a known desperate path. A woman would use tight bindings around her waist, layers of bulky clothing, anything to conceal the growing swell of her belly. It was a race against time, trying to stay in the board's good graces and earn a few more coins before the inevitable discovery. This practice is a subject of some historical debate. How long could a woman realistically hide a pregnancy in such a crowded, scrutinized environment? Some historians think it would have been nearly impossible to go past the first few months, while others point to anecdotal evidence of women managing to conceal it almost to term, a feat of incredible desperation and cunning. For now you have succeeded. You have excised the immediate catastrophe. But you are not the same. Something has been broken in you, and not just physically. The experience has hollowed you out, leaving a core of cold, hard trauma. You are also now in debt to a woman who is arguably more dangerous than Isabel. You are caught in a new web, a secret that binds you to the shadowy world of the midwife and the swan. You catch your reflection one day in a shard of broken mirror that Elodie keeps. You see a stranger. The girl from the village is gone. The frightened newcomer to the city is gone. In her place is a woman with old eyes, a face pale with pain and secrets. You have survived, but the cost is written all over you. You successfully hid your growing belly, but now you must hide the scars, visible and invisible, of what you did to stop it. The secret you carry is a heavy, phantom weight. You escaped the immediate crisis, but the ordeal has left you fragile, both in body and in spirit. The constant effort of pretending to be well is exhausting. The dull ache inside you is a persistent reminder of the violence you endured, and then, one evening, your carefully constructed facade shatters. It happens during an encounter with a client. He is a coarse wool merchant, reeking of lanolin and dale, and he is rougher than most. A sudden, careless movement sends a bolt of white-hot pain through your abdomen. An involuntary cry escapes your lips, a sound of pure agony that you cannot stifle. The man, startled and annoyed, shoves you away. He complains that you are no fun, that he didn't pay for a sickly, whining girl. He dresses quickly, storms out of the room, and goes straight to Isabel to demand his money back. That is the end. Isabel doesn't bother with questions. She doesn't ask what's wrong or why you cried out. All she sees is a dissatisfied customer and a disruption to her business. For her, you have crossed the line from asset to liability. Her face, usually a mask of shrewd calculation, hardens into cold fury. Sick, are you? She snarls, her voice low and dangerous. I don't keep sick girls in my house. You're no good to me. She doesn't even let you go back to the attic to retrieve your few belongings. Not the small carved bird Elodie once gave you in a rare moment of camaraderie. And most devastatingly, not the small cloth bag with the hidden coins and the smooth stone from your father's hearth. Your entire world, your secret hoard of hope and your last link to your past, is in that room, and you will never see it again. She calls for her to thuggish enforcers. They grab you by the arms, their grips like iron bands. You don't struggle. You are too weak, too shocked. They drag you through the main hall past the other girls. Marguerite looks away, her face pale with pity and fear. Elodie watches with an unreadable expression. Is it triumph or a chilling recognition of her own potential fate in her eyes? You see the brutal truth of this house. You are all disposable. They haul you to the front door and throw you out into the street. You land hard in the filth and mud of the alley, the impact sending another wave of agony through your body. The heavy oak door slams shut with a sound of absolute finality. The bar thuds into place on the other side. You are outside. It's a cold night. A damp, biting wind whips through the narrow street, carrying the stench of refuse and drain. The sky is a starless, impenetrable black. Just a few hours ago you were inside, in the relative warmth of the house, a part of its ugly, dysfunctional family. Now you are nothing. You have no money, no possessions beyond the thin, worn dress you're wearing. You have no friends, no family to turn to. You are utterly, completely destitute. This was the ultimate threat that hung over every woman in the brothel, the fear of being cast out. It was the bordesse final, most powerful to love control. And it wasn't an empty threat. The streets of any medieval city were littered with the homeless and the desperate beggars, orphans, the sick, the elderly, and women like you, who had been used up and thrown away. Your legal status as a prostitute, which offered so little protection while you were working, now offers none at all. You are no longer a public woman under the city's regulation, you are just another vagrant. The history of social welfare in the Middle Ages is a patchwork of private charity and church-run institutions. There was no government safety net. Some monasteries offered alms to the poor, and some guilds looked after their own destitute members. But for a woman like you, with no connections, no guild, and a shameful past, these avenues were closed. You were on your own. This is a topic of some debate among historians. How did a single, destitute woman survive the records of sparse, as these were the people who fell through the cracks of history? They didn't write chronicles or own property. Their stories are largely lost, but their existence was a grim reality. Shivering, you pull yourself to your feet, using a wall for support. The pain in your belly is a fiery counterpoint to the cold seeping into your bones. Every shadow in the unlit alley seems to menace you. The city at night, once a place of secret opportunity, is now an scape of pure threat. Any passing group of men could see you as prey. The city watch, if they found you, would likely arrest you for vagrancy, which could mean a public whipping or a few days in the stocks. You have no destination. You just start walking, shuffling through the mud, staying close to the walls, trying to be invisible. You think of your village, of the smell of the damp earth, of your mother's face. It feels like a story from someone else's life, a world you can never return to. You think of the stone from the hearth, now lost to you forever. It's as if the last piece of your former self has been amputated. You are no longer Jean the prostitute. You are not the girl from the village. You are an aimless, shivering ghost in a city that has no place for you. You have escaped one prison only to find yourself in a larger, colder, and infinitely more dangerous one. The immediate future is a terrifying blank. Where will you sleep? What will you eat? How will you survive until morning as you huddle in a darkened doorway, trying to shield yourself from the wind? You realize the brutal truth: Isabel didn't just throw you out of her house, she threw you out of the world. The city offers no shelter. You spend the night huddled in the cramped space between two rain barrels in a forgotten courtyard, shivering uncontrollably, the predator gnawing at your limbs. Every sound, the distant shout of a drunken reveler, the scurrying of rats in the refuse pile nearby, the creak of a loose shutter in the wind sends a jolt of fear through you. Sleep is impossible. Your mind is a maelstrom of terror and regret, while your body throbs with a pain that is deep and unrelenting. As the first grey, watery light of dawn seeps into the sky, you are faced with the stark, immediate reality of survival. You are consumed by two basic, powerful needs: warmth and food. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is a familiar foe, but this time it's accompanied by a profound weakness from your ordeal and the cold. You are not just hungry, you are depleted. You join the ranks of the city's beggars, a silent, spectral army that materializes with the daylight. You find a spot near the steps of a large church, hoping the piety of those attending morning mass will translate into a coin or a crust of bread. You pull your thin dress tightly around you, bow your head, and hold out a trembling hand. You don't speak. You don't have the energy. The experience is a new kind of degradation. As a prostitute, men looked at you with lust, contempt, or a mixture of both. But they looked at you. Here, on the church steps, you are rendered completely invisible. Pious merchants, wealthy women with their servants, even the priests themselves, they look through you as if you are a ghost, a piece of the scenery. Their gazes slide over you, their expressions carefully neutral, so they don't have to acknowledge your existence, your need. You are an unsightly nuisance, a reminder of a poverty they find distasteful. After hours, a single person shows you a sliver of kindness. It's an old woman, her face as wrinkled as a dried apple. She doesn't give you a coin. She presses a small, dense-soaked cake into your hand. It's dry and coarse, but as you devour it in the alleyway, it tastes like the most exquisite feast you've ever had. It's not just sustenance, it's a tiny spark of human connection in a universe of indifference. This hand-to-mouth existence becomes your new reality. Days are spent begging or scavenging for scraps of food at the edges of the market. Nights are a desperate search for a place to sleep that offers some small protection from the elements on the city's dangers. You are becoming feral, your senses sharpened to the nuances of survival. You learn which bakers are most likely to throw out their day-old bread, which streets are patrolled by the unforgiving city watch, and which doorways offer the deepest shadows. But a new and more terrifying problem is unfolding within you, one that makes your homelessness seem like a secondary concern. The bleeding, which had subsided under the midwife's care, has started again. At first it's slight, but it doesn't stop. It's a slow, persistent drain on your already weakened body. You feel a constant, dizzying lightheadedness. You know, with a chilling certainty, that you have an infection. The filthy conditions of the operation, they have left a festering wound inside you. In modern terms, you would be suffering from sepsis or a severe uterine infection. You would be rushed to a hospital, given powerful antibiotics, and likely undergo surgery. In your world, there are no antibiotics. There is no understanding of germ theory. An internal infection of this magnitude is an almost certain death sentence. The historical study of maternal mortality in the Middle Ages often focuses on the dangers of childbirth itself. But the mortality rate from postpartum and post-abortion infections was also astronomically high. This is a point of academic discussion. Just what was the primary killer of women in these situations? Was it hemorrhage during the event itself, or the septicemia that followed without precise records? It's impossible to know for sure. But historians agree that the lying-in period after any birth or termination was fraught with invisible, microbial dangers. You are now in a race against an enemy you cannot see. The fever comes and goes in waves, leaving you drenched in sweat and shivering. The pain in your abdomen is no longer a dull ache, it's a constant, burning fire. You are trapped in a nightmare. You need help, but there is nowhere to get it. Affordable only to the wealthy. Affordable only to the wealthy. The barber surgeon who inspected you at the brothel would be useless. Your only hope might be a charitable infirmary run by a monastery, but they are few and far between, and often have strict rules about who they will admit. A fallen woman, visibly sick and destitute, would likely be turned away at the door. One rainy afternoon, the weakness becomes overwhelming. The world begins to tilt and swim before your eyes. You stumble into a deserted alley, seeking only a place to lie down. You collapse onto a pile of damp, rotting straw behind a tannery, the stench of the curing hides thick in the air. This, you think with a strange sense of calm, is where you will die. As you lie there, drifting in undoubt of a feverish delirium, you feel a sense of profound tragic irony. You went through an ordeal of unimaginable pain undressed to prevent a future catastrophe. You sought to avoid the perilous, often fatal, trial of childbirth on the streets. But in your desperate attempt to sidestep one form of death, you have walked directly into the arms of another. The midwife's knife, the tool you hoped would save you, has killed you just as surely as an unassisted birth in a freezing alley would have. It was never a choice between safety and danger. It was only ever a choice between different kinds of death. As your vision darkens and the sounds of the city fade into a dull roar, your last coherent thought is of the smooth, cool stone from your village hearth, the one solid thing you ever truly owned, now lost forever. But you don't die. Not yet. Through the fog of your fever, you feel a gentle shaking. A voice, soft and concerned, cuts through the delirium. You struggle to open your eyes. A face is hovering over you, blurry at first, then slowly coming into focus. It's a woman, her head covered by the simple double wimple of a nun. Her hands are clean, her expression one of pity, not condemnation. You have stumbled by sheer dumb luck into the alley behind the city's small convent, the sister house to the grand monastery on the hill. Two nuns, on their way to dispose of kitchen scraps, found you. They see not a sinner, but a soul in distress. In a world that has shown you nothing but transcational cruelty and cold indifference, this small act of unconditional compassion is so shocking it feels like a dream. They help you to your feet, their arms supporting your frail weight, and guide you through a small wooden gate in the high stone wall. You have crossed a threshold into another world. The chaos and filth of the city fall away, replaced by the hushed, orderly tranquility of the cloister. The air here smells of beeswax, baking bread, and damp stone. It's a place of quiet routine and prayer, the complete antithesis of the world you have known. You are taken to the convent's infirmary. It's a small, clean room with a real bed, not a straw pallet, but a timber frame with a mattress stuffed with wool and topped with clean linen sheets. It is the most luxurious thing you have ever felt. The nun who found you, Sister Agnes, tends to your fever. She bathes your face with cool water and makes you drink a warm, sweet, milk-based drink called a posset. It's a common medieval remedy for the sick, comforting and nourishing. Sister Agnes is a skilled healer. She examines you not with the crude intrusiveness of the barber surgeon, but with a gentle, practiced hand. She recognizes the signs of a female ailment, of a fever of the womb. She doesn't ask how you came to be in this state. The wound and the infection are evidence enough. The convent's approach to medicine is a fascinating blend of practical herbalism and deep faith. This is a point of historical nuance. While the male-dominated university-trained physicians often looked down on herbal remedies as women's medicine, nuns in convents were often the primary keepers of this traditional knowledge. They cultivated extensive medicinal herb gardens and created their own salves, tinctures, and potions. Their care was a holistic mix. They would treat your body with herbs while praying for your soul. Sister Agnes applies a poultice of comfrey and yarrow to your abdomen to draw out the bad humors and fight the infection. She gives you willow bark tea for the fever, a natural source of salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. These are the advanced medicines of her time. And she prays. She sits by your bedside for hours, her rosary beads clicking softly, her voice a low, soothing murmur. As you lie in the quiet, clean room, drifting in and out of consciousness, your gaze often falls on the large wooden crucifix on the wall. The church, for your entire life, has been a source of fear and condemnation. The priests preached of hellfire for women like you. The institution itself sanctioned the trade that exploited you, framing it as a necessary evil. You have every reason to hate it, to see it as the source of your misery. And yet, here you are. The only people who have shown you true, selfless kindness are agents of that same church. You are being nursed back from the brink of death by the very institution that condemned your life. This is the central paradox of the medieval church. It was an institution of immense power, often corrupt and deeply hypocritical. It upheld a rigid social order that crushed people like you. But at the same time, it was also the primary source of charity, of art, of learning, and of genuine, profound faith. It was capable of both breathtaking cruelty and breathtaking compassion. Historians grapple with this duality constantly. Was the church a force for social control or a source of spiritual comfort? Was its charity a genuine expression of Christian love or a way to maintain the status quo by providing a safety valve for the utterly destitute? The answer, of course, is that it was all of these things at once. For you, this convent bed, the abstract arguments are meaningless. All you know is that the world outside this wall let you die in the mud, and the world inside it is trying to save you. Slowly, miraculously, the fever begins to break. The constant, burning pain in your abdomen starts to recede into a dull ache. The bleeding slows and then stops. You are weak, emaciated, but you are alive. Sister Agnes' remedies and her prayers, or perhaps just the simple act of being clean, warm, and fed, have pulled you back from the edge. As your strength returns, a new, unspoken question begins to form. What happens now? The nuns have saved your life, but they cannot keep you here forever. You are not one of them. You are no longer a prostitute, no longer a beggar. You are a patient, a charity case. And as you stare at the crucifix on the wall, you feel a profound and unsettling mix of gratitude and confusion. You are alive because of the church's mercy. But what kind of life, if any, would it allow you to live now? As your strength slowly returns, a new kind of existence takes shape within the convent walls. You are no longer confined to the infirmary bed. Sister Agnes, seeing the life returning to your eyes, gives you simple chores to occupy your hands and mind. You sweep the cold stone floors of the cloister, your broom moving in a slow, rhythmic motion that is almost meditative. You help in the kitchen, kneading dough with hands that are finally clean. A quiet purgatory between a hellish past and an unknown future. One evening, just as the sky is turning a deep shade of violet, you are in the convent's main courtyard when you hear it. A sharp, distinct ringing of a small bell coming from the outer wall near the main gate. It's not one of the grand church bells that mark the hours of prayer. This is a small, urgent, and somehow secret sound. You see Sister Agnes pause in her work, her face settling into an expression of profound, weary resignation. She makes the sign of the cross and walks purposefully towards the sound. Curiosity, a feeling you haven't experienced in a long time, gets the better of you. You follow her at a distance, staying in the shadows of the covered walkway. She leads you to a section of the wall you've never paid attention to before. Built into the thick stone is a strange wooden contraption, like a thick, upright barrel set into the wall, with an opening on the convent side. This is a Foundling wheel. The rotated Egli S post. It's a clever, desperate piece of engineering, a silent mediator between two worlds. A mother, standing on the street outside, can place her unwanted infant into the opening on her side, ring the bell, and turn the cylinder. The baby then rotates safely to the inside of the convent, and the mother can slip away into the night, her anonymity preserved, built to accommodate a sorrow so immense it cannot show its face in the daylight. As Sister Agnes waits by the wheel, you press yourself deeper into the shadows, a hidden observer of this secret ritual. You can hear faint, muffled sounds from the other side of the wall, a woman's choked sob, a whispered prayer. Then, with a soft creak, the wooden cylinder begins to turn. It rotates a half circle, and the opening that faced the street now faces the courtyard. Lying in the small, hollowed-out space is a tightly swaddled bundle. Sister Agnes doesn't hesitate. She reaches in with gentle, practiced hands and lifts the baby out. It's tiny, impossibly so. A faint, mewling cry escapes the bundle, a sound that pierces the evening quiet and goes straight through you like a shard of ice. You watch, frozen, as the scene plays out, and a cold dread washes over you. This could have been you. If the herbs had failed, if the midwife had refused you or been caught, this would have been your final desperate act. You would have endured the terror of a secret pregnancy, the agony of a lonely birth in some filthy hovel, all leading to this single moment, giving away your child to a wooden machine in a wall. As Sister Agnes comforts the crying infant, she finds something tucked into the swaddling clothes. It's not a coin. It's one half of a simple tin button, snapped deliberately into. This is a token, a common and heartbreaking practice of the time. A mother would leave a unique, identifiable object with her child, half a coin, a specific piece of ribbon, a cheap religious medal clinging to the impossibly slim hope that one day, circumstances might change. She might be able to return with the other half of the token and reclaim the child she was forced to abandon. It was a lottery ticket of hope, a tangible piece of a broken bond. This is a subject of much historical and archaeological interest. Founding hospitals across Europe have collections of these tokens, sad little archives of maternal heartbreak. But historians debate how often these reunifications actually happened. The overwhelming likelihood is that they were incredibly rare. The token was more of a prayer than a practical plan. As you stand there, your heart pounding, you feel a profound and nauseating wave of empathy for the anonymous woman on the other side of the wall. You understand her desperation, her grief, her choice that was no choice at all. And it forces you to look at your own actions in a new, terrifying light. What you did, the violent, secret act in the midwife's hut, was an attempt to prevent this very scene. You chose to risk your own death to avoid bringing a child into a world where this was its best hope for survival. Was your choice better, or was it just a different kind of tragedy? There is no answer. There are only two paths, both paved with suffering. Sister Agnes carries the baby towards the infirmary, her movements full of a sad, practiced tenderness. She knows, as you now begin to understand, that the founding wheel is not a guarantee of life. It is merely a chance at it. Overcrowding, disease, and the sheer fragility of newborn life meant that many of these foundings would not survive their first year. The convent was a haven, but it was not a miracle. The bell, the turning wheel, the baby's cry, the entire scene is burned into your memory. It is not a comfort. It is a fresh haunting. It's the ghost of the life you destroyed, and the ghost of the life you might have been forced to live. As you slip away back to your small room, the sound of that tiny, helpless cry follows you, a sound you know will now be part of your nightmares. The image of the foundling wheel and the tiny, abandoned infant becomes a new fixture in your troubled mind. It replays itself when you try to sleep, a constant, looping reminder of the agonizing choices women face. You see the half button in Sister Agnes' hand, a symbol of a hope so fragile it's almost transparent. And you can't help but wonder about the women for whom even the foundling wheel was not an option. One day, while cleaning the convent's small library under the watchful eye of an elderly, literate nun, you are tasked with dusting a large, leather-bound book. It's a penitential, a manual for priests, filled with lists of sins and their prescribed penances. Your Latin is non-existent, but the supervising nun, a woman with a surprising taste for morbid gossip, idly translates some of the headings for you. She points to a section with her long, bony finger. This part, she says in a low voice, is for the gravest of sins, homicide. And under that heading, she points to a specific subsection. The word, she says in your language, is infanticide. The word hangs in the dusty air of the library, heavy and cold. It is the sin that dares not speak its name, the choice that lies in the deepest, most shadowed cellar of human desperation. It is the final, most horrifying alternative for a woman who has no herbs, no midwife, and no foundling will to turn to. You imagine it, a scene you push away but which your mind morbidly constructs anyway. A girl, not unlike you, she has hidden her pregnancy to the very end, perhaps binding her stomach so tightly she can barely breathe. She gives birth alone in a freezing barn or a filthy city slum, her only companions the rats and the darkness. The baby is born, alive and crying, its small voice a death sentence for them both. A crying baby attracts attention. A baby needs food, care, things she absolutely cannot provide. To keep it is to guarantee that they will both be discovered, and that they will both starve or be punished. And so, In a moment of unimaginable despair, she makes a choice. Perhaps she smothers the cry with a rag. Perhaps she leaves the newborn in the woods for the animals to claim. Perhaps she drops it into the deep, fast-moving river that flows through the city. An act of profound violence, born not of malice, but of a terror and hopelessness so complete that it warps the very fabric of maternal instinct. This is, for many historians, one of the darkest and most difficult subjects to study. The evidence is, by its very nature, hidden. Infanticide was a capital crime in most of medieval Europe. A woman discovered to have committed it would face a horrific death, often drowning or being buried alive, punishment seen as grimly symmetrical to the crime. Because the consequences were so severe, the acts were carried out in the utmost secrecy. So how do we know it happened? The evidence is indirect but compelling. It comes from court records detailing the trials of the few women who were caught. It comes from the skeletal remains of newborns found at the bottom of wells or in Roman ruins, places where a body could be easily disposed of. And it comes, as you've just seen, from the penitential books, which wouldn't prescribe a penance for a sin if no one was committing it. The fiercest debate among historians today revolves around its frequency. How common was this desperate act? Some scholars, looking at the demographic data and the sheer number of legal and religious prohibitions against it, argue that it must have been a grim, but not insignificant, feature of medieval life, especially for the very poor and marginalized. They argue it was a form of postnatal abortion, a last resort in a world with no reliable contraception, arguing that while it certainly happened, to portray it as common is to misread the evidence and to paint a picture of medieval mothers that is unfairly monstrous. They suggest that abandonment was a far more frequent choice than outright killing. The truth, as with so many hidden aspects of the past, is likely somewhere in the middle and is impossible to quantify with any certainty. You think back to your own ordeal, the pain of the herbal poisoning, the terror of the midwife's knife. At the time they felt like the absolute limit of what a person could endure. But now you understand there was another, darker path you did not have to walk. You were trying to destroy a pregnancy. You were not forced into a position of having to destroy a child. The distinction feels both vast and razor thin. You remember the moment you first felt the sickness, the alien presence inside you. You saw it as a threat, a parasite that would destroy your life. You fought it, you attacked it. The woman in your grim imaginacies, however, has gone through 9 months of that presence. She has felt it move, felt it quicken. She has given birth to it, seen its face, heard its cry. Her act, therefore, feels different, more personal. Or is it? You look at your own story. You were driven by fear, by the absolute certainty of ruin. What if your fear had been just a little more acute? What if your desperation had been just a shade darker? Could you have been that woman? The question is a physical blow. You feel a wave of nausea, a dizzying vertigo. You are ashamed of the question, but you cannot unask it. The old nun, oblivious to your inner turmoil, has moved on to another section of the book, muttering about the penance for usury. But you are still standing there, the dust motes dancing in the sliver of light from the high window. And you feel a profound, chilling connection to the most reviled and misunderstood woman in history. You have looked into the abyss of her choice, and in its reflection, you have seen a terrifyingly familiar face. It is the face of a girl who was given no good options, only a ladder of increasingly tragic choices, and was forced to decide just how far down she was willing to climb. As you slowly regain your physical health within the convent's peaceful confines, your mind remains a turbulent sea. The revelation of infanticide, the spectre of the Foundling will. These are not abstract horrors. They are roads not taken, alternate endings to your own story, and they force you to consider the one other path you might have been forced upon had you not been found by Sister Agnes. What if the midwife's intervention had failed, but you had chosen to keep the child? You imagine it. You are cast out of the brothel, not sick and bleeding, but visibly pregnant. Your belly is a public declaration of your state, a brand more potent than any red ribbon. You are no longer just a vagrant, you are a vagrant with child, a walking, breathing scandal. The first challenge is simply surviving the pregnancy on the streets. Your body, already weakened by a poor diet and the stresses of your former life, would be pushed to its limits. Every scrap of food you beg or scavenge for would not be for you alone. You would be eating for two, a biological demand that the city's garbage heaps could never meet. The malnutrition would be profound, stunting the growth of the child within you and leaving you perilously weak. Then comes the birth. You wouldn't have the luxury of a midwife, not even a dangerous one. You would be alone, hiding in some squalid corner, terrified that the sounds of your labor would attract the wrong kind of attention. The process, dangerous for any medieval woman, would be exponentially more so for you. No clean cloths, no hot water, no experienced hands to help. Just you, the filth, and the blinding pain. The risk of bleeding to death or dying of a subsequent infection would be immense. For the sake of this thought experiment, let's say you both survive this initial ordeal. Now, the true impossibility of your situation begins. You are a new mother, with a newborn infant completely dependent on you. But you are homeless, penniless, and a social outcast. How do you feed yourself, let alone a baby? You cannot leave the infant to go beg or search for food. A baby left alone, even for a few minutes, is at risk from the elements, from other desperate people. So you must take the child with you. You picture yourself sitting on the church steps, not as a lone, anonymous beggar, but as a mother with a crying baby. This changes everything. A lone beggar can be ignored. A mother and child are a more potent symbol. They might evoke more pity from some, earning you an extra crust of bread. But from others, they would evoke condemnation. You are the living embodiment of sin, your baby the proof of your lechery. You would face not just indifference, but open hostility, and the practicalities are a nightmare. The baby needs to be kept warm, but you have no blankets, only your own thin dress. It needs to be kept clean, but you have no access to fresh water. You would try to nurse it, but your own malnourished body would struggle to produce enough milk. The baby would be constantly hungry, constantly crying. Its wails are public broadcasts of your shared misery. There's a small, poignant historical detail to consider here: swaddling. Infants in the Middle Ages were almost universally swaddled, wrapped tightly in bands of cloth from head to toe. This was done for several reasons. It was believed to help their limbs grow straight, it kept them warm, and perhaps most importantly, it kept them contained and demobilized, making them easier to manage. For a mother like you, swaddling would be essential. It would be the only way to keep the baby secure as you move through the dangerous city streets. But you have no swaddling clothes. You would have to use rags, dirty and thin, offering little warmth or protection. The debate among historians here is a subtle one. Did having a child on the streets increase or decrease a woman's chances of survival? The common sense assumption is that it would make survival nearly impossible. A baby is a huge liability. However, some sociologists of poverty argue that in certain contexts, a child can be a resource. A child can evoke more sympathy and thus more charity. A mother's fierce, protective instinct can also give her a will to live, a reason to fight that she might not have had on her own. It's a grim calculus with no clear answer. For you, in this imagined scenario, it feels like an anchor, dragging you both down into an inescapable cycle of hunger and despair. You would be trapped. You could not work, not even in the most menial, back-breaking jobs. No one would hire a woman with an infant in tow. Your only option would be to continue begging, hoping for enough charity to keep you both alive for one more day. The child would likely be sickly, malnourished, and constantly at risk. Its chances of surviving its first year in such conditions would be vanishingly small. You would watch your child fade, helpless to stop it, and you would know that its suffering, its inevitable death from starvation or disease, was because of you. Because you chose to keep it. The guilt would be an unbearable, corrosive weight. As you sit in the quiet sanity of the convent, you realize the stark truth. Choosing to keep the child would not have been an act of love. It would have been an act of cruelty, condemning it to a short, brutal life of suffering. The Foundling wheel, once a symbol of heartbreaking abandonment, now looks different. It looks like an act of profound, sacrificial love. The mother who gave it its only child gave it its only chance, a chance you, in this imagined life, would have denied yours. The realization is a quiet, devastating blow. It rifles all the moral certainties you thought you had. In this terrible broken world, love and cruelty, sacrifice and selfishness are all tangled together, their definitions warped by the brutal pressures of survival. Your body is healing, but your mind is a battlefield. You replay the scenarios, the choices, the what-ifs. The midwife's hut, the foundling wheel, the slow starvation on the street with a child in your arms. Each is a ghost the quiet cloisters. In this strange, safe place, you finally have the luxury of reflection. And with it comes a new question. You have been fixated on the unique, catastrophic danger of motherhood. But was it, truly, the greatest danger you faced? You force your mind back to the brothel, back to the daily reality of your life as Jean. You peel away the existential dread of pregnancy and look at the more mundane, but no less real, threats you lived with every day. The primary and most constant of these was violence. The fist and the dagger were not abstract concepts, they were tools of the trade, a constant, looming presence. You remember the clients, the quiet, sad ones were the exception. The norm was a casual, implicit threat. You were a commodity they had purchased, and they felt entitled to treat you as such. Their hands were not always gentle. Their frustrations with their lives, their wives, their poverty could erupt with frightening speed. An accidental word, a perceived slight, could earn you a sharp slap or a rough shove. You learned it to be a placid, unreactive surface, a mirror that reflected back whatever they wanted to see, because to show your own personality was to risk a violent reaction. And then there were the truly dangerous ones. The drunken soldiers, their tempers frayed, their sense of consequence dulled by ale. They saw you not as a woman, but as an object for their amusement, a release for the aggression they couldn't display elsewhere. You remember one night, a soldier, enraged that you didn't have any more wine to give him, pulled a small wicked-looking knife from his boot. He didn't use it. He just held it to your throat. The cold steel, a shocking, terrifying sensation against your skin, while he laughed at the fear in your eyes. Isabel's thugs eventually threw him out, but not before the message was sent your life was fragile, held in the hands of any man with a few coins and a bad temper. The violence wasn't just from clients. It was structural, built into the business. Isabel's enforcers were a constant presence. They were her solution to every problem. A girl who was too slow to turn over her earnings, a girl who argued back, the girl who was caught trying to hide a coin or would feel the back of their hand. It was a simple, brutal system of control, a physical reminder of who held the power. You learned to walk softly, to speak quietly, to make yourself small to avoid their attention. This casual, everyday violence is a key feature of medieval urban life that historians often emphasize. Life was cheap, with no professional police force as we would understand it, and a legal system that was often slow and biased. Personal violence was a common way to settle disputes. For a woman at the absolute bottom of the social ladder, with no family or guild to protect her, this meant she was perpetually vulnerable. Or raped was not a possibility, it was a daily occupational hazard. And he was a small, specific, and brutal detail about that world, the legal recourse. What if a client did seriously injure you? Could you go to the authorities? In theory, yes. Assault was a crime. But the reality was grimly different. There are court records from this period of prostitutes bringing charges against clients. But they were rarely successful. A woman's testimony, especially a public woman's, was considered inherently untrustworthy. It would be her word against his, and his word, as a man and a citizen, would almost always carry more weight. Furthermore, a prostitute suing a client was seen as a disruption to the social order. It was a case of the unclean trying to hold the respectable to account, and the system was built to prevent that. The very act of seeking justice could get you punished for insubordination. So you exist in a state of constant, low-level fear. The dagger at your throat, the angry fist, the rush of these are the punctuation marks of your life. It is a known danger, a familiar terror. You learn to anticipate it, to navigate it, to survive it. Now you compare this to the other danger, the one that sent you to the midwife's hut. The slow, silent terror of the missed month. The creeping realization of pregnancy, which was worse. The dagger is a sudden, hot threat. It is external. It is a man's anger, a man's weapon. You can, perhaps, placate the man, de-escalate the situation. You can run. You have a chance, however slim, to react. The pregnancy, however, was a cold, quiet threat. It came from within. It was your own body, your own biology, turning against you. There was no one to placate, nothing to run from. It was a clock ticking down inside you, each day bringing you closer to inevitable ruin. The violence of a client was a possibility, the catastrophe of childbirth was a certainty. Historians debate the emotional and psychological landscape of people in the past, a field sometimes called the history of emotions. It's a tricky business trying to understand how people felt from dry records. Did a medieval person fear death in the same way we do? Was their threshold for violence higher? It's impossible to say for sure. But as you sit in the convent's garden, feeling the sun on your face, you perform your own internal calculation. The daily threat of the dagger was terrifying. It kept your nerves frayed, your body tensed for a blow. But the threat of motherhood was a different kind of terror. It was a slow, inexorable dread that colonized your mind. It was a fear that didn't just threaten your life, but your very identity, turning your female body, the source of your livelihood, into the instrument of your destruction. The dagger could kill you, but the pregnancy would erase you. And as you weigh the two in the quiet of your mind, you begin to suspect that the silent, internal threat was the one that truly brought you to your knees. The days in the convent drift by, marked by the ringing of bells for prayer. The rhythm is calming, a stark contrast to the chaotic, unpredictable tempo of your old life. Your body has healed from its physical trauma, leaving only a deep, internal ache that you suspect will never truly go away. But as the immediate crises fade, the new, more insidious anxiety begins to creep in, the fear of the future. You are safe here for now. The nuns are kind. Sister Agnes has become a quiet, maternal presence in your life. But you are not a nun. You haven't taken vows. You are a guest. A charity of the convent is not infinite. It is a small community with limited resources, already burdened by the Foundling left at its wheel and the alms it gives to the city's poor. You cannot stay here forever. The question gnaws at you during the long, quiet afternoons. You look at your hands. They are no longer the calloused, birth-stained hands of a village girl, nor are they the hands that were subjected to the nightly commerce of the brothel. They are clean, soft, and idle. They are the hands of a woman with no purpose and no place. Your most valuable asset in your former life, the only thing you had to sell, was your youth. In the brutal economy of the brothel, a girl of 15 was a prize. A woman of 20 was a veteran. A woman of 25 was nearing the end of her career. You are still young, but you feel ancient. The experiences you've had have aged you from the inside out. But you know that if you were to return to that life, a thought that fills you with a cold, sickening dread, your value would already be diminishing. You see it in your memory of Isabel the bored. You remember the desperate, almost frantic way she would apply thick layers of lead-based powder to her face, trying to conceal the wrinkles in the sagging skin. Her power in the house came from her shrewdness and cruelty, but you could see the fear in her eyes. She was a former prostitute, now a manager, but she was still trapped in a world that discards women as they age. This fear of aging, of losing one's looks, is not unique to your profession. Noble women worried about it, hoping to keep their husband's favor and secure their position at court. But for you, it was not a matter of vanity, it was a matter of survival. Your face, your body, that was your entire inventory. When the inventory spoiled, you were out of business. What were the options for an aging prostitute in the Middle Ages? This is a question historians have tried to piece together from scant and scattered sources. The records tend to focus on the young, desirable women who were part of the regulated trade. The older, discarded women often vanished from the historical record. But we can't surmise a few grim possibilities. Some, like Isabel, managed to claw their way up. They became bawdess themselves, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation. This required a certain kind of ruthlessness, a willingness to inflict the same cruelties that were once inflicted upon them. It was a dark, twisted form of success. Others might find a niche at the very bottom of the market, servicing the poorest clients for a pittance, working out of squalid taverns or dark alleys until they were too sick or too broken to continue. This was a slow, grim descent into utter destitution. A few might become laundresses or alewives, professions that were often associated with prostitution and existed on the lower rungs of the social ladder. But even these jobs required a degree of capital or connection that a woman cast out from a brothel was unlikely to have. And what about you? The thought of returning to that life is unbearable. But what other skills do you possess? You know how to pull weeds and grind grain, but your family's land is lost to you. You know how to survive in a brothel, a set of skills you pray you'll never need again. Here in the convent, you have learned to sweep floors and knead bread, the basic, unskilled labor of a domestic servant. Perhaps that is a path. Could you find a position as a servant in a wealthy household? It's a possibility, but a remote one. Your past would be a permanent stain on your reputation. To get a position in a respectable house, you would need a reference, a guarantee of your good character. Who would speak for you? The nuns, perhaps. But the moment your story was known, you would be seen as a source of moral contagion, a danger to the honor of the house. You might be hired for the lowest, most backbreaking work, but you would always be watched, always suspected. This lack of viable exit strategies is what made the system so pernicious. It was designed to be a one-way street. Once you entered, it was nearly impossible to leave and reintegrate into normal society. This is a subject of some historical debate. Was this social ostracism a deliberate policy, or an unintended consequence of the moral stigma attached to the trade? The Church's establishment of specific institutions for penance in Prostitute suggests they recognized the problem, but these were often the only sanctioned way out. You look at the high walls of the convent. They were once your sanctuary. Now they are beginning to feel like the boundaries of your shrinking world. Outside these walls lies a society that has no place for you. Inside, you are living on borrowed time. The future is not a bright horizon, it's a terrifying fog. The fear of a dagger, the fear of pregnancy, those were immediate, visceral terrors. This new fear is a colder, more cerebral one. It is the fear of obsolescence, of being a woman with a past, growing older in a world that has no use for you. It's the quiet, creeping dread of a slow erasure, a life that ends not with a bang, but with a long drawn-out fade into invisibility and irrelevance. As the seasons turn and the convent garden moves from the full bloom of summer to the crisp decay of autumn, the question of your future becomes more pressing. You can't stay here forever, a perpetual guest in this house of God. You have 2 hands, a strong back, and a mind sharpened by harsh experience. There must be a way to forge a life for yourself. One day, Sister Agnes comes to you with a grave expression. She tells you that Isabel, your former board, has died. A sudden, violent fever took her in the night. The news hits you in a strange and unexpected way. You feel no sorrow, but no triumph either. You feel a sudden, cold sense of dislocation, as if a keel and mark in the grim geography of your past has just vanished. Sister Agnes continues, the city council, who licensed and taxed Isabel's house, is looking for someone to take it over. The business, however sordid, is a source of revenue and a tool for social control. They are not willing to abandon. And then she says the words that make the blood drain from your face. A man from the council, who knows of your history with the house and your subsequent time in the convent, has made an inquiry. He has suggested that you, a woman who knows the trade and has since been living a pious life, might be a suitable candidate to run the establishment. The offer is a devil's bargain, presented to you in the serene quiet of a convent garden. It is, you realize with a jolt, the most common and perhaps the only real path of advancement in your former world. It's the chance to go from being the exploited to being the exploiter. You imagine it. You, sitting in Isabel's chair, with her ledger and her keys. You, taking the coins from the hands of young, frightened girls who are just like you were. You, calculating their debts for food and lodging. You enforcing the rules with a hard voice and a cold heart. You would have a roof over your head. You would have a small, ugly sliver of power in a world that has only ever rendered you powerless. This transition from prostitute to board is a well-documented, if grim, career path in the historical record. It made a certain cold, pragmatic sense. Who better to run the business than someone who knew it from the inside out? A former prostitute would know how to manage the girls, how to handle the clients, and how to negotiate with the corrupt city officials. She would be inured to the ugliness of the trade, her heart already hardened by her own experiences. It was a closed system that bred its own leadership. Would you be a different kind of board, a kind of one you tell yourself you would? You would protect them from the most dangerous clients. You would treat them with a dignity that Isabel never afforded you. But, as you play this scenario out in your mind, a creeping, ugly honesty begins to surface. The system itself will corrupt you. The need to pay the city's exorbitant taxes, the protection money to the guards, the cost of maintaining the house, these financial pressures would force you to make the same cruel calculations Isabel did. You would have to be the girls not as people, but as assets. You would have to push them to earn more, to take risks. And what would you do when one of them got sick or pregnant? Would you truly be able to sacrifice your own newfound security for her well-being, or would you, in the end, throw her out into the street, just as you were thrown out? The line between survivor and perpetrator begins to blur. You would become the very thing you despise, a jailer in a prison you once occupied. Your own trauma would become the tool you use to control others. Here's a specific, odd detail about the business of being aboard the bawdy house court. In some cities, like London, there were special courts or legal sessions designed to handle disputes arising from the regulated brothels. A board might have to appear in court to answer for violations like serving meat on a fast day, or allowing stolen goods to be fenced in her establishment. This meant a successful board needed a degree of legal savvy and a network of connections within the city's corrupt bureaucracy. It wasn't just about being cruel, it was about being a cunning, ruthless businesswoman. The debate among historians here is a moral and psychological one. Did these women become bawdes because they were inherently cruel? Or did the profession make them so? Is it possible to hold power within a fundamentally exploitative system without becoming an agent of that exploitation? It's a question that echoes through history. From the overseers on a slave plantation to the coppers in a concentration camp, the system itself is designed to turn its victims against each other. You look at Sister Agnes, her face calm and patient, waiting for your answer. She has presented the offer without judgment as a practical, if distasteful, option. She knows the world outside these walls better than you think. The offer is a glimpse of a future, a secure, stable, and utterly damned one. It would mean spitting on the memory of the girl you were, the one who suffered under Isabel's rule. It would mean taking the pain you endured and inflicting it on a new generation of lost girls. It would be the ultimate act of self-betrayal. You give Sister Agnes your answer. No, the word is quiet, but it feels like the loudest sound you've ever made. It is an act of rebellion, not against a person, but against a system. It is a refusal to participate in the cycle of cruelty. It is a choice to remain powerless, to embrace an uncertain future, rather than accept a secure one at the cost of your own soul. You don't know what you will do or where you will go, but you know with a certainty that you will not become Isabel. You have finally found a line you will not cross. Your refusal of the councilman's offer hangs in the air, a definitive statement about the person you are trying to become, but it also leaves you exactly where you were before, without a future. Sister Agnes nods, her expression one of deep, quiet approval. She did not expect you to say yes. The offer was a test, not just from the council, but from God, and in her eyes you have passed. Now, she presents you with another option, the one she had been holding in reserve. It is the path that the church officially sanctioned for women like you. She tells you of a place, a special kind of convent, known as a Magdalene house. These institutions, named after Mary Magdalene, the biblical figure who was reimagined in the Middle Ages as a repentant prostitute, were established specifically for the care and salvation of fallen women. They were a unique feature of the medieval social landscape, part refuge, part prison. A woman could enter a Magdalene house to escape her former life, to live in piety and perform penance for her sins. In return for food, shelter, and the promise of salvation, she would give up the rest of her life to the service of God. Sister Agnes explains that there is such a house 2 days' journey from the city. She can write a letter of introduction for you. It would be a new life, a safe life, a respectable life. You try to imagine it. A life of bells, prayers, and quiet contemplation. A life of hard, simple work, scrubbing floors and tending gardens, not for a cruel board, but for the glory of God. It would be a life free from the touch of men, free from the fear of violence, free from the gnawing anxiety of survival. The offer is a lifeline, a chance to be washed clean, to be reborn as a new pious woman. But as you listen, a sense of unease settles over you. Sister Agnes speaks of penance, of atoning for your past sins. You would be expected to live out your days in a state of perpetual repentance. Your identity would forever be the penitent prostitute. You would not just be a nun, you would be a Magdalene, a special category of saved sinner, your former life a permanent part of your new identity. This is the complicated reality of the Magdalene houses, a subject of much historical discussion. Were they genuine sanctuaries, offering women a real chance at a new life and spiritual solace, or were they institutions of social control, a way for the church to sequester and manage a problematic female population? The answer is, as always, complex. For many women, they were undoubtedly a blessing, the only viable escape route from a brutal and short life. The routine, the safety, the sense of purpose, it could be profoundly healing. But there was a cost. Entering a Magdalene house meant surrendering your autonomy completely. You would take vows, not just of poverty and chastity, but of obedience. Your days would be rigidly structured, your contact with the outside world severed. It was a life sentence, albeit a peaceful one. A particularly strange and debated aspect of some Magdalene houses was their internal hierarchy. In some cases, women from wealthier backgrounds who entered voluntarily, perhaps after a scandal, were given higher status and easier duties than the common street walkers who made up the majority of the residents. The class structures of the outside world were replicated, in a new form, even within these houses of supposed equality before God. You think about the vows. You would be trading the prison of the brothel for the cloister of the convent. A gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. You would be safe, but you would not be free. The girl from the village who walked to the city seeking a life of her own would end her journey locked away, her choices once again made for her by a powerful institution. You remember the feeling of the smooth stone from your father's hearth in your pocket. It was a symbol of your past, of your identity. You remember the secret coins you hoarded, a tiny rebellion, a claim to a small piece of your own life. You have fought so hard in your own quiet, desperate way to preserve a tiny spark of selfhood. Would entering the Magdalene house mean finally extinguishing that spark, surrendering your story and your will to the grand narrative of sin and redemption? Your past is a part of you. It is a story of pain and survival, of terrible choices and small victories. You are not proud of it, but it is yours to spend the rest of your life apologizing for it. Feel of the girl who endured so much. You do not want to be penitent Jean for the next 40 years. You just want to be Jean. You are caught between two versions of the church's solution for you. The first was to become a manager of sin, a functionary in the system of controlled vice. The second is to become a living symbol of repentance, a ward of the system of institutionalized mercy. Neither option feels like a life that is truly your own. You thank Sister Agnes for her kindness, for the offer, for saving your life. You tell her you need to think, to pray on it. But in your heart, a new, terrifying, and exhilarating idea is beginning to form. What if there is a third way, a path that is not offered by the council or the church, but one you have to cut for yourself? It would be a path fraught with danger and uncertainty, a path with no map and no guarantee of success. It would be the path of true freedom, and for the first time in a very long time you feel not just fear, but a flicker of something that feels dangerously like hope. The idea of a third path, a life unbound by either the brothel or the convent, is a radical and terrifying thought. It takes root in your mind and grows, nurtured by the small spark of autonomy you fought so hard to protect. Where could you even go? What could you possibly do? The world you know is divided into spheres you can't or won't re-enter. And then one day, the most unlikely of possibilities walks back into your life. You are helping Sister Agnes distribute morning alms, small loaves of bread to the poor who gather at the convent gate. As you hand a loaf to a stooped figure in a dusty traveler's cloak, the man looks up. Your eyes meet. and your world stops. It is him, the sad merchant, the man who paid for an hour of your time only to talk about his late wife. The man who asked for your real name and gave you a silver coin, the coin you used to pay the laundress to direct you to the midwife. His face is etched with shock, recognition, and something else you can't quite read. He calls you by your real name, the one you whispered to him in that dingy room, a name no one has used since. The sound of it is a key turning in a long locked door. Sister Agnes looks between the two of you, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. The merchant, whose name you learn is Thomas, explains that his trade route brings him through the city only once or twice a year. He tells you he had thought of you often, that he had worried about you. He is a widower, lonely, and getting older. His children are grown and have their own lives in a distant city. He is a man adrift. Over the next few days he comes to the convent gate each day. He doesn't ask to see you alone, he speaks respectfully with Sister Agnes, explaining his intentions. He makes a generous donation to the convent, a gesture of both gratitude and good faith. And he makes you an offer so far beyond the realm of possibility that it feels like a fairy tale. He wants to marry you. He says he sees in you not a past to be judged, but a strength he admires. He is a man of some modest wealth, a member of the rising merchant class. He owns a house in a town several days' journey away. He can offer you a life of comfort, of stability, of respectability. He can make you an honest woman. The proposition is a storybook ending, the kind of fantasy that girls in the brothel might have whispered to each other in the dark, a dream of being rescued by a wealthy patron. A Cinderella story for the medieval gutter, and it is happening to you. But is it really your mind, conditioned by years of abuse and betrayal, is immediately suspicious? What are his true motives? Does he want a cheap domestic servant? Is this some strange form of pity, or is he a predator of a different, more subtle kind? This scenario of a prostitute being redeemed through marriage to a client is a powerful and enduring trope in literature and folklore. But how often did it happen in reality? The historical evidence suggests it was exceptionally rare. The social stigma was simply too great. A man's reputation, his business, his standing in his guild and his community all would be jeopardized by marrying a woman with such a past. For a man like Thomas, a solid member of the bourgeoisie, to do so would be a radical, socially suicidal act. And this is where historians debate the flexibility of medieval social structures. Were the lines of class and reputation as rigid as they appear in the official records, or was there more room for maneuver, for personal choice, for unconventional relationships to form in the messier reality of everyday life? Perhaps a man in Thomas's position, a widower, no longer needing to make a strategic marriage to advance his career, living in a town where his wife's origins might not be known, could actually pull it off. It would still be a gamble, a secret to be closely guarded. You spend hours talking with Thomas, with Sister Agnes always present as a chaperone. He answers your unspoken questions with a quiet, patient honesty. He admits he is not offering a grand passion but a partnership, a companionship for his remaining years. He asks for nothing from your past but your strength. He is offering you not just a home, but a new identity, a blank page. You are faced with your final choice. The first option was to become a perpetrator, the bored, a choice you rejected. The second was to become a penitent, the Magdalene, a choice that felt like a surrender. This third option is to become a wife. It is a dependent role. Yes, you would be under his authority, your life governed by his. But it is a respectable dependency. It is a life within society, not outside of it. It offers something the others do not: a chance at a normal life. A chance to have a home that is not a prison, to have a name that is not a brand, to walk down the street without shame. It is a fairy tale. And you know that fairy tales are often just stories we tell ourselves to hide a darker truth. But after a life of such unrelenting, brutal reality, perhaps you are entitled to believe in a fairy tale, just for a moment. Perhaps this one, against all odds, is true. You think of the risks. The risk that he is not what he seems. The risk that your past will be discovered and you will be shamed and cast out again. The risk that a life of quiet domesticity will feel as much like a cage as any other. But then you think of the alternative. A life of uncertainty, of poverty, of constantly looking over your shoulder. You look at Thomas at his kind, sad eyes, and you decide to take the biggest gamble of your life. You decide to trust someone. You say yes, not with the quiet finality of your no to the councilman, nor with the hesitation you felt about the convent. You say it with a fragile, trembling hope. I hope that the story doesn't have to end in a brothel or a convent. I hope that after everything, a quiet, ordinary life might be the most extraordinary ending of all. The transition from the hushed, grey world of the convent to the bustling, colourful life of a merchant's wife is a profound shock. Your wedding is a small, discreet affair held in the convent's chapel with only Sister Agnes and another nun as witnesses. Thomas gives you a new dress, made of a soft, deep blue wool that feels impossibly luxurious against your skin. It is the first new garment you have owned since you were a child. As you put it on, you feel like you are shedding a skin, leaving behind the ghost of the beggar and the shadow of Jean. The journey to your new home is a revelation. You travel not on foot, but in a sturdy cart, protected from the elements by a canvas cover. For the first time, you are seeing the world not as a landscape of threat, but as a place of beauty. You see rolling hills, vast forests, and towns that are not the terrifying, chaotic city you knew, but smaller, more orderly communities. Thomas points out landmarks, tells you the names of rivers, and speaks of the trade goods that flow on these roads. You are seeing the world through his eyes, the eyes of a man who moves through it with purpose and confidence. Your new home is a revelation. It's not a nobleman-esque castle, but it is a palace to you. A timber-framed house in the heart of a prosperous market town. It has two floors. It has glass in the windows, a luxury that still feels magical. There is furniture, a real table, sturdy chairs, a large bed with a feather mattress. The main room is dominated by a large hearth that crackles with a warm, welcoming fire. It is clean. But your new life is not without its own challenges. You are now the mistress of a household, a role for which you have no training. You must learn to manage a small staff, a cook and a young serving girl. You must learn about household accounts, about buying supplies, about the rhythms of a respectable life. It is a foreign language, and you are often clumsy in your attempts to speak it. You make mistakes, you burn the bread, you overpay at the market. But Thomas is patient, correcting you gently, seeing your efforts rather than your failures. The greatest challenge, however, is internal. You are haunted by the fear of being discovered. Every new person you meet, a neighbor, a member of Thomas' guild, is a potential threat. You live in terror that someone from your past will appear, that a rumor will start, that the fragile facade of your new life will be shattered. You learn to be quiet, demure, to keep your eyes downcast, to attract as little attention as possible. Your survival instincts, honed in the brothel, are repurposed for a new kind of hiding. You are not hiding your body anymore, you are hiding your history. And then there is the question of sickness. The memory of the infection that nearly killed you is a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. You have survived, but what if there are lasting consequences? This brings us to the final, silent killer that hung over your old life: disease. In the brothel, you were exposed to a host of illnesses. Beyond the immediate, visible dangers of violence, there was the invisible threat of contagion. The medieval world had a name for the constellation of diseases associated with sex: morbus gallicus, the French disease, a term that became common after the 1492 and is often associated with the arrival of syphilis in Europe. But long before that, other sexually transmitted infections, like gonorrhea and chlamydia, certainly existed. Even if they had no specific names and were poorly understood, they were often lumped together under the general category of leprosy or venereal leprosy, a catch-all term for any disfiguring skin condition. A woman in a brothel was at the epicenter of contagion. She could contract an illness from one client and pass it on to countless others. With no effective treatments, these diseases could lead to chronic pain, sterility, and a slow, agonizing death. This is a point of considerable debate among medical historians: how prevalent were these specific diseases, and what was their true impact before the well-documented syphil, This epidemic of the late 15th century, the skeletal evidence is often ambiguous, but written accounts of burning pains and sterility suggest these illnesses were unknown and feared part of the sexual underworld. For you, in your new life, this fear manifests as a deep anxiety about your own body, specifically about your ability to have children. You know that the brutal procedure in the midwife's hut, combined with the subsequent infection, may have left you barren. In your old life, this would have been a blessing, a release from your greatest fear. In your new life, it is a potential failure. As a merchant's wife, you are expected to produce heirs to inherit Thomas' business and property. It is your primary duty. Each month that passes without a pregnancy is a quiet, personal crisis. Thomas never speaks of it, never pressures you. His kindness, in a way, makes it worse. You feel like you are failing him, failing in your new role, a defective wife. The irony is staggering. You have spent your entire life in terror of a pregnancy that would destroy you. You have poisoned your body, submitted to a back alley butcher, and nearly died of infection, all to prevent motherhood. And now, the one thing you are supposed to do, the one thing that would solidify your place in this new, safe world, may be the one thing you are no longer capable of. You have escaped the dagger, the fist, and the immediate catastrophe of an unwanted birth, but you have not escaped the consequences. The silent, invisible killers of your past, the trauma, the fear, and the lingering damage of disease have followed you into your new life. They are the ghosts that sit with you by the warm fire, the silent guests at your respectable table. You have a new name, a new home, a new life. But you are still living in a body that remembers everything. Years pass. The quiet rhythm of your life with Thomas becomes a gentle, soothing melody. The sharp edges of your past have been worn smooth by the passing of time, like a stone tumbled in a river. You are no longer the frightened girl in the convent or the haunted woman hiding her history. You are the respected mistress of your house, known for your quiet kindness and the sad, knowing wisdom in your eyes. One winter evening, you sit by the fire, the dancing flames casting long, flickering shadows on the wall. Thomas is asleep upstairs, his breathing a soft, steady sound that has become the background music of your peaceful life. Outside, the wind howls, a mournful sound that reminds you of the cold nights you once spent on the street. In these quiet, reflective moments, the old question sometimes returns. No longer a source of terror, but a subject of philosophical weight, the dagger or the pregnancy, which was the greater fear. You close your eyes and you can still, if you try, summon the ghost of the first fear, the hot, metallic terror of a knife at your throat, the explosive violence of a drunken fist. It was a fear of the external, of the sudden, brutal intrusion of a man's world upon your body. It was sharp, immediate, and visceral. It was the fear of a hunted animal, the constant, nerve-shredding vigilance required to survive an encounter, a night, a week. But then you summon the ghost of the second fear, and it feels different. It is a cold, slow, seeping dread. It wasn't a threat that came from the outside, it was a betrayal from within. It was the horror of your own body becoming a prison, a biological clock ticking towards your doom. The dagger was a possibility. The pregnancy was a certainty. It was a fear that didn't just threaten to kill you, but to completely erase you, turning you into a pariah to be cast out, or forcing you down a path of choices so monstrous they would shatter your soul. You and Thomas never had children. The midwife's work, the infection that followed, they left their permanent mark. For years it was a quiet sorrow between you, an unspoken failure. You would see other women with their babies, and feel a pang of something complex and painful. You even once, in a moment of desperate longing for normalcy, sought out an old woman in the market who sold fertility charms, a pouch of dried herbs and carved stones. A pathetic echo of the poisonous plants you once sought for the opposite reason. The charm, of course, did nothing. This barrenness is the final, lasting legacy of your choice. It is the scar that proves which wound was deeper. The fear of the dagger left you with nightmares, with a flinch that never quite goes away. But the fear of pregnancy forced you to mutilate your own body, to sacrifice your future fertility for your immediate survival. Historians today debate the psychological lives of people in the past. Did they have the same concept of trauma? How did they process and move with the ghost's experiences? It is a question we can never truly answer. We can only look at the choices they made. You made a choice. You chose to face the midwife-esque knife rather than the certainty of childbirth on the streets. You chose a definite, terrible violence over a slow, inexorable biological fate. And in that choice, you find your answer. The dagger was the fear of what a man could do to you. The pregnancy was the fear of what your own body, in a world that gave you no good options, would force you to become. The second was a threat to your humanity. And as the fire burns low, you know with a calm, unshakable certainty which one was the true monster of your story. The greatest danger you ever faced wasn't a weapon in a man's hand. It was the ticking clock in your own womb. The story now softens, its edges blurring as the fire in the hearth dies down to glowing, sleepy embers. Your journey is over. The noise of the medieval city, the whispers in the brothel, the prayers in the convent, they all fade, leaving only the sound of the wind outside and the steady, quiet breathing from the room upstairs. You are safe. You are safe. You are warm. You are at peace. The woman in the story, the girl who walked so far and endured so much, has found her quiet harbor at the end of the world. Her memories are no longer sharp-edged shards of glass, but smooth, sea-worn pebbles, heavy in the pocket of her past, but no longer able to cut. And now, as the last embers glow, the story itself begins to drift away, becoming part of the quiet room, part of the sleeping house. The distinction between her story and your own gentle descent into slumber begins to dissolve. The warmth of her hearth becomes the warmth of your own bed. The safety of her home becomes the comfort of your own pillow. There are no more choices to be made, no more dangers to face. There is only the soft weight of your blanket, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, and the deep, quiet darkness that precedes a peaceful dream. The world of daggers and desperate choices has faded, leaving only a soft, quiet murmur, a story that has been told, a journey that has reached its end, easing you now into the soft embrace of the night. The end of the article. Good night.